Arrival arrived in cinemas in 2016 and became one of the most acclaimed science fiction films of the century. The tale of a linguist tasked with facilitating first contact with an alien species, it set director Denis Villeneuve down the path to Hollywood stardom. My name's John, and with me, our very own Abbott and Costello, that's Westy.
If you could see your whole life from start to finish, would you change things?
And Matt.
Coffee with some aliens.
It's the story of your life, and you're at the beginning and the end with ATRM, Amy Adams and aliens. Now that's a proper introduction. Hello and welcome to All the Right Movies, a non-zero-sum game, the cornerstone of civilization, and a podcast on classic and hit films.
That's us.
Sure is.
This episode, it's a bit of a highbrow number, isn't it?
Thank God.
Right up Westy Street. It's Amy Adams and All the Right Movies together at last as we talk the 21st century science fiction classic that is Denis Villeneuve's Arrival.
Mm-hmm. Lovely.
Before we get the universal translators out, though, should we mention ATRM Patreon?
We really should.
Yep.
Well, if you're a regular listener to our ATRM Classic podcast, you can help support what we do by becoming an ATRM patron. Patrons get access to our bonus podcast episodes, double feature and the watch list, access to our whole podcast archive full of bonus episodes and archived ATRM Classic episodes, and get the chance to vote to decide future episodes, and the chance to ask questions that we'll answer on the show, as well as an invite to the ATRM community.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
There's always some chats going on in there, some nice folk in there as well, right?
Yes, lovely.
There is.
And I mean, there's a load of podcast content in there now. Too much, really.
Yeah.
We're too generous.
Yeah, we
it's
are.
going to take you a while to get through it, so you might as well start now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to find out more, visit patreon.com/alltherightmovies or subscribe directly on Apple Podcasts or Spotify now.
Yeah.
So much stuff in there. It's not a weapon. It's a gift.
It is. It really is. Something for
gift.
everybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Back to today, though, and its Arrival.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we talking about this one, Matt?
I love it when we look at more contemporary films, I think, and this one is a contemporary film that comes with a big reputation. It means a lot to people. People take a lot from it. It's one of those rare films that does get people talking for a long time after it.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of something that's huge in scale, but then it's almost intimate in what it does want to talk about. It takes big swings in terms of its subject matter. Villeneuve, massive name now. We've never talked about Amy Adams either. Just one of the best actresses of a generation.
Yeah.
So loads of reasons to talk about this one.
Absolutely. I mean, my first introduction to Arrival was Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang, the short story.
Oh, okay.
Based on, yeah. And as a piece of writing, it is really good. Very much about language, so it lends itself more to the written word than to cinema, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when I heard it was being adapted for a film, I was pretty surprised. And then when I heard it was being directed by the guy who made Sicario and Prisoners, I couldn't believe it. But like cerebral science fiction about first contact by a director with a reputation for like grounded, realistic storytelling, it was like Christmas to me.
Too right.
And we'll talk about all that transition from page to screen, how it works or how it doesn't in some ways maybe.
Yeah.
It is our first time with Amy Adams, one of the most highly thought of actresses out there, so looking forward to talking about her.
Yes.
And in terms of creativity, there's so much to get into. Music, cinematography, concept design, visual effects, production design, loads of creative talent on the film, some great behind-the-scenes stories, so let's get into it.
Absolutely.
And Westy, it took me years to figure out what you were talking about, and then when I did, it changed my life. So you're the guy to talk Arrival with, aren't you?
No, never a truer word spoken. I mean, I find it really hard to rate this, and what I'm going. Oh no, sorry, that's the end. I'm getting confused.
Easily done.
I mean, it's wonderful. It's a film about aliens, which ultimately is about humanity and about humans and about where we act and what's important. And it does take an outside force to make us realise how important things really are. And it's beautifully melancholic. It's got a really strong message. It's got a wonderful circular feel to the whole narrative and the whole film. Visually as well as emotionally, it kind of comes all around full circle. It's very subtle filmmaking. It's very much, pay attention or you're just going to lose track. And there's a lot to celebrate. It's beautiful visual storytelling. It's really, really confident. It's really, really strong. And like Matt said, it does stay with you for a very long time once you've seen it. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this one.
So Arrival was produced by Film Nation Entertainment, Lava Bear Films and 21 Laps Entertainment, distributed by Paramount Pictures and released on November the 11th, 2016. Filmed on location mainly in and around Montreal, Quebec and Canada, the film was directed by Denis Villeneuve, written by Eric Heisserer based on Ted Chiang's novella Story of Your Life, and stars Amy Adams as Louise Banks, Jeremy Renner as Ian Donnelly, and Forrest Whitaker as Colonel G.T. Webber. Our first time with all three and Villeneuve, I believe.
Yes,
Indeed.
Let's get ourselves to Montana then, should we?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Right then, we're meeting Dr. Louise Banks as we talk the beginning and the end and everything in between of Arrival.
We'll take off in 5.
The beginning.
Arrival doesn't hang about in getting things moving, and we're with Louise as she first sets eyes on the mysterious spacecraft and their inhabitants in the first act. We'll talk about all of that, but before we do, we're looking at how the doc gets involved.
We are.
So, via an opening montage, or a closing montage maybe, we meet Louise and her tragic daughter Hannah before it all kicks off. 12 alien ships turn up around the globe, and linguist Louise is recruited by the US military to broker first contact with the 7-limbed extraterrestrials known as heptapods.
Yes.
Some fairly significant events to start us off then, Matt. How was the opening for you?
The opening montage is very, very Terrence Malick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very reminiscent of Tree of Life, holding the baby's hand, that juxtaposition of childhood games with nature, that huge lake in the background. And then Louise's opening dialogue, it's already established in what a lot of the themes are going to be here. Memory, time, what she thinks is the beginning of Hannah's story, something that's going to be turned on its head by the end. But the interesting thing for me is the fact that all of this imagery on the face of it is happy. Newborn baby, playing games in the garden. But the music is so melancholy over the top of it.
Yeah.
So you know something's not right. You get those little glimpses of Louise where she looks very lost in thought. She looks very melancholic. And that's before you even see her at the hospital when she says goodbye to Hannah, and it kind of fits together. And I think this part of Adam's performance plays really differently on repeat viewings. It's a really effective contrast. It's a lot like the beginning of Up, except 1,000 times more upsetting.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I love the opening shot of Louise's huge screen window.
Yeah.
I love the font they use for the title as well. It's like some modified version of Gotham or something. It looks really good.
Yeah, it's great.
But I think one of the themes of the film is context and how it can change our perception of something. And the opening montage hits very differently on rewatches than it does on a first watch.
Yeah.
As we understand the cutaway sequences on flashbacks to flash forwards. And Louise playing with Hannah is a lot more poignant, I think, second time round as well. And I love the transition from the flash forwards into the present day. Louise's voiceover says, like, there are days that define your story beyond your life, like the day they arrived, and boom, we're just into the narrative. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And once we're into the story, I'm hooked instantly. Big fan of the scenes at Louise University, filmed at the University of Montreal. I like how hardly anyone turns up for a lecture, and then that student's just like, can you put the news on, so we know something's up?
Yeah.
And then Louise stands right in front of the TV, so nobody else can see. I'd be furious. Aliens on there.
Especially the one who asked as well. It's right in front of her.
Yeah. Great opening though. Sets the like earnest tone the film has. Sets the visual tone of beautifully composed shots. It's a fantastic first few minutes.
Yeah. And then after that, she gets a visit from Webber, who comes into her office, and it's very formal. And that guy standing shuts the door as if he's not listening to anything. I love that guy in the background. It's like nobody's coming in, nobody's going out. This is like pretty scary. And then Webber just pushes this small recorder over and says, I've got something for you to translate.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, okay. And then plays it. And you just think, well, what on earth am I supposed to do with this?
Exactly. He's like, can you hear any words? Definitely not.
Can you, mate? Translate this. Are you having a laugh? Who do you think I am? Unbelievable. But you can see from Adam's performance that she's just incredibly intrigued at this moment. Like, she wants to be involved. She's like, is that?
That's great, yeah.
And he's like, yes, it is. And she wants to be involved. She's like, well, I need to be there. And it's just a really, really great setup for the character. And then she just plays the audience so well because you just wanted to have this knowledge, you wanted to have this power, and you wanted to have this real gravitas over who's talking to her. And she turns around and she says, you know, you're going to see the other guy. We'll ask him what the Sanskrit word for war is.
Yeah, that's really good.
And then we find out later, and he says he translated it as an argument, when really it is a desire for more cows. So it comes back and shows that she really knows what she's talking about, and this sets up her character really well for the intelligence and the integrity and the real fire that she's got to find out what's going on.
Oh, yeah, if I ever need a linguist, I'm going to Louise Banks.
Absolutely. And many other things.
Yeah, for numerous reasons.
Anything, really. Pint of milk, anything.
But I love all the deliberate slow tracking shots. There's a great one when Louise walks to her classroom, and then another walking across the parking lot when the cars are crashing into each other.
Yeah.
And then the opening shot to this scene that kind of creeps around the corner into our office.
Yeah.
Really good. It creates this feeling of calm and serenity that's kind of personified by Louise, and then the heptapods when they turn up as well.
Yeah, it's all circular. I mean, from when she's walking through the hospital and she's walking around the corner, she's coming around corners, and even the lecture hall that she's in kind of mirrors the heptapod ship.
Yeah.
It's got a circular back and then a flat front, so everything kind of works towards where we're going.
Absolutely.
But the meeting with Webber, that's simplified from what's in the original short story. In the book, Ian's part of this meeting as well, and here Louise says she needs to see the heptapods in person. But in the book, she explains it's because she doesn't know if they're making sounds human ears can't hear, and she says they need to do a spectrograph.
Right.
Yeah, a constant difference between the book and the film is that the book is more scientific. I mean, the film's pretty scientific as well, but Villeneuve changed the balance to lean more towards artistic in the film. And in the film, obviously Louise meets Ian for the first time on the helicopter on the way to Montana, where he rubbishes her book instantly. Actually, science is a cornerstone of civilization. That's the first thing he says to her.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
It's a great meeting, that, though. I mean, if we're going to go into that scene, it's just wonderful because she believes in language and he believes in science. She's trying to communicate and he can't hear her until she uses science to communicate with him by putting the headphones on and using the technology. So it's like the language and the science coming together so they can communicate.
Nice, yeah.
It's wonderful stuff. It's all there.
Colonel Webber is played by Forrest Whitaker, of course, one of the most acclaimed actors of his generation, but very much a supporting role here.
Yeah.
What do we think of him in the film?
I just don't know if there's a more intense actor than Forrest Whitaker. Every role I see him in, he just seems like he's going to explode with tension or anger. What I like about Webber, though, is he's not stupid or stubborn. He's got his job to do and he'll do it no matter what, but he will also listen to Louise and he trusts her and he buys her some time later on. So,
He does.
Yeah, I really like Whitaker in this.
He looks for reason, doesn't he, and everything.
He does, yeah.
He does, yeah. And Amy Adams called Forrest Whitaker a beautiful soul. And she said that after she filmed her first scene with him, she broke down in tears.
Wow.
And apparently Bradford Young, the DP, he did the same thing.
Bloody hell, what scene was that?
Everyone blubbing on set.
Yeah.
Don't remember that scene.
Villeneuve said he wanted somebody who could bring a lot of gravitas to Webber without having much to work with. And Forrest Whitaker was the only person he ever wanted to play him. He said he's a master, one of the best actors living today. And I kind of disagree.
Yeah, I think he absolutely is.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is the opening. Beautiful shots, beautiful music, beautiful souls. Arrival has arrived. Time for the aliens too as well, I think.
Let's do it.
Louise and Ian get to Montana, one site of 12 around the world where the alien ships have appeared, and it's straight to business. After getting a good look at the craft, we head inside with the doctors. The first session is strange in many ways, and the second is where they get to grips with the aliens. Ian later names them Abbott and Costello, and Louise makes a contact breakthrough. So how do you find things in the House of the Heptapods, Westy?
I think the initial introduction to them is absolutely terrifying. Just the pace in which they're taken through the medical, the pace in which they're taken to the ship, and they've got to get straight on there, and there's no real time for us to adapt, and there's no real time for them to adapt. And I think it's wonderful from Bradford Young here and from Villeneuve how they do not rack focus to the background. Everything is focused on Louise and Ian. Everything is focused on the foreground. And this whole film is shot wide open, so we've got very blurred backgrounds.
Yeah.
But this whole moment, when the gravity shifts, and up becomes forward, down becomes backwards, and it's just brilliant because then it becomes circular. It's fantastic. Louise needs that push from Webber, which gets her on board, and then she gets used to what's going on. And Ian has to fend for himself, which again reflects the character. And I think what's lovely in this, I don't know if this is intentional, but I've got loads of these little tiny Westy clip theories going through.
Nice.
But Ian is literally carrying a torch for Louise when he's jumping on.
In more ways than one.
He's literally carrying her torch because she can't do it by herself, and I think that's really wonderful. There's a real naturalistic look to the whole thing. There's a strong alien vibe here, I think, the way the faces are lit in the suits and they're just climbing through, and it's got that darkness and that foreboding to the score, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
Very naturalistic look to the heptapods as well when they kind of appear. They resemble this, like a nature, like trees, and they're just kind of in their own atmosphere. Everything's got this real cinematic vibe to it, and it feels really big, but at the same time, like Matt said, feels really intricate and really simple, and you just really want to continue with this story. And if you're not bought in by this point, just turn it off.
Yeah.
This is it now. We are in.
Yeah, well, I said before, the film's got me hooked from the opening with the beauty of it and the premise, obviously.
Yeah.
But once we get in there with the aliens, it has to deliver, and it absolutely does.
It does, yeah.
The first time we see the ship, that wide shot from the helicopter, that is one of the most stunning shots you could ever see anywhere.
That's how you use CG as well. If you're going to use CGI, that's how you use it.
It looks fantastic.
Is that real?
Yeah, yeah. The image of the ship among the misty clouds is like something from the Ten Commandments, waiting for Charles Lesson to turn up. Curious.
Imagine. Out of his cold, dead hands. Yeah.
Right on a whiteboard instead of a stone tablet.
And the sound mix of the soft, like eerie music and the really bassy helicopter sound.
Yeah.
It's all like mesmerising. I feel like Mowgli when Car gets hold of him, like eyes spinning around in my head. And I'm going to stick my neck out and say I think Denis Villeneuve might like Stanley Kubrick a bit.
Do you reckon?
Oh, just a bit.
There's a shot from the base of the ship looking right up the craft, identical to the famous monolith shot in 2001. Ian runs his hand along the hull, similar to Hayward doing the same thing with the monolith. And once we enter the ship, there's those one-point perspective shots looking up the corridor. Kubrick, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, hey, if you're going to borrow shots, you might as well borrow them from 2001.
Yeah, borrow them from the best.
Exactly. I mean, I was going to mention this later, but when Louise is in there by herself, the monolith's on its side. So again, it shows this duality of this circular motion. So it's really brilliant.
I love all the gravity weirdness. That's not in the book, but it's a great idea. Different medium, and it's a really cinematic way to enter the kind of heptapods world.
Yeah.
Not sure what Isaac Newton would make of that, but I mean, I think it's great.
Yeah, he'd love it.
And first meeting the heptapods, how good's that shot when they enter the chamber, and from our point of view they're like walking on the ceiling. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
At that moment I always feel that kind of mix of excitement and fear. I think you would feel if you were in that situation.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Great filmmaking, top to bottom for me.
It is, yeah. Visually amazing.
The production designer was Patrice Vermette, and he'd already worked with Villeneuve on Prisoners, Enemy and Sicario. And Villeneuve told him he wanted the inside of the heptapod ship to be created practically. So there was a real 150-foot long corridor created. That's the one that takes us into the chamber. And the chamber was created as a real room coming off the corridor with a huge screen. And the whole thing was built 50 foot off the ground, so cast and crew had to use a scissor lift to get into the set, just like we see the characters doing in the film.
Blimey.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think the gravity changed direction once we're inside.
No.
But
shame.
Who knows? I mean, I wasn't there. Maybe. I love that, though. Building the set for real must help the actors get into the zone, surely.
Yeah. And in the book, the heptapods don't physically come to Earth. There are ships that arrive all over the planet, which are described as looking glasses, and on these screens the humans can see the heptapods aboard their own ships. They're therefore not in the same location.
Right.
Yeah, it's like a Microsoft Teams call, basically. And in the book, the heptapods display their language on their own little screens rather than shooting out the ink circles. But all that stuff changed much more cinematically and for the best, surely.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
When they designed the inside of the ship, Patrice Vermette said they took inspiration from an American artist called James Turrell.
Nice.
He's part of the light and space movement and is known for making spaces where he uses light installations to change our perceptions of depth and scale.
Wow.
Vermette said he and Villeneuve came across Turrell when they were making Sicario and said to each other then, when we do a sci-fi movie, we'll be looking at this guy's work again.
And they did.
And they did.
Yeah, James Turrell's stuff's very minimalist and often uses big light-filled screen. So when you see it, the influence on Arrival is totally obvious.
Right.
And that idea of a screen, it does seem to follow Louise through the film, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that opening shot that you said, John, I mean, that recurs as well, and it does reflect when she's standing in front of the screen with the heptapods there, and the trees kind of mirror that, and the heptapods mirror nature and who she is, and it's just that recurring theme that keeps coming back and back, which I think is fantastic.
Big window at home, massive whiteboard in that class. I bet our TV's massive as well.
Yeah, huge.
And the ships all float 28 feet above the ground, so never actually land on Earth. This isn't the case in the book, and Vermette said that was a very deliberate choice. That idea is the heptapods have travelled thousands of light years to get here, but they want humans to make the final move in terms of contact.
Yeah, nice touch. I saw an interview with Eric Heisserer, the screenwriter, and he said that in the script there was a line at one point where Ian says, they came all this way, why can't they go another 20 feet?
Yeah.
But he said it was taken out because it sounded like Ian was having a go at the heptapods. Lazy.
Yeah, the idea of the aliens having 7 limbs and being called heptapods is taken from the book, but there are some differences. The book describes the heptapods as having a body like a barrel and says they have 7 lidless eyes. Oof. They were designed for the film by an artist called Carlos Huente, who Villeneuve hired as he loved the work on Prometheus.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, he did some of the design work on that.
Yeah.
And they worked on the heptapod design for months, apparently. Took inspiration from whales and octopuses.
Right.
And Carlos Fuente did hundreds of concepts before Villeneuve was happy with it. I love them. I think they look brilliant.
They do look great, yeah.
Yeah, they do.
There's like knuckles almost to them. And
It always reminds me of Knuckles.
yeah, like trees and like a third eye in there somewhere, and it's got all this kind of deeper meaning. But I think it's wonderful that you don't necessarily see them in all of the glory fully lit. I think it's wonderful.
Do you also think they look a bit like the aliens off The Simpsons? Kang and Kodos. Imagine those guys coming out from the mist.
You shine a light on them, probably looks what they look like, yeah.
But I mean, how many science fiction films have you seen, even like big budget ones, and when the aliens show up, it's like, yeah, nice, but kind of seen that before.
Yeah.
The heptapods are unique to me, and that's so important. It gives the film a really strong identity.
Yeah,
Yeah, I want to talk about the next time Louise and Ian go up after that initial introduction, because I love any movie scene that goes on to become a famous meme, and this one definitely has, with Louise and the whiteboard.
It really has.
The amount of times you see this on social media now with something written across the top of it. But it does make me laugh a little bit, because we've established Louise as the top linguist in the world, and her plan now is to take a whiteboard, write human on it in massive letters, and then just point at herself for a bit. Like, to be fair, I could have come up with that idea.
yeah.
It's like when you go abroad, you try and order something off the menu, and you just say it really loudly and slowly. It's the way to understand it.
Just point at the picture.
Yeah,
You
just
got
point
a
at the picture.
Omelette.
Yeah, but I think there is an underlying serious point to this, which is that it must be so incredibly frustrating, because how do you even start this task? How do you even begin the communication? You know, to be serious about it.
Yeah.
Yes, Louise is this incredible linguist, so if she's finding it this difficult to start the conversation, that just reiterates what a massive task she has in her hands here, and humanity in general.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Matt. The equipment that humans have is a bit lo-fi. I'd be embarrassed boarding an alien spaceship with a canary in a cage. Came to the wrong planet, yeah. But when Louise breaks the barrier and does make contact, it is a great moment. When we first see the heptapods writing, and that inky logogram circle, it's just a great image. And there's some great visual storytelling. The point of view shot from Louise as she looks up at the logogram, so we see it from below, makes me feel like I'm right there every time I see it. And there's a side-on kind of wide shot where Louise is like dwarfed by the screen in the heptapods. I feel kind of overawed by it. I actually think it's quite moving when they first like make contact with each other.
Yeah.
And I like how when we see the logogram for the first time, Louise laughs. She turns to Ian, he's smiling as well. Then cut to Webber, furious. Massive scowl on his face.
Get on with it.
Yeah.
That's why he's there, surely.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I do like Ian, but why is he in there?
Good point.
After giving it big licks in the helicopter, pulling Louise's book apart, he doesn't do anything in these sessions. It's all Louise.
He does walk.
Calls them Abbott and Costello and walks.
Ian walks.
Yeah, he does a bit of a walk.
The heptapods have two different languages, and that's from the book. The spoken one is heptapod A, and the written one is heptapod B. The book describes heptapod B as being like a geometric pattern, like a lattice. The idea of it being the circular logogram we see in the film was created by Eric Heisserer when he wrote the screenplay.
Yeah, semi-graphic, like they say in the film, heptapod B. So, like, it gives meaning but doesn't represent sound in the way that our language does.
Right.
And I saw him in an interview with Heisserer when he said that he was struggling to describe what the logogram should look like in the script without it becoming like a novel and really long. And his wife said to him, why don't you just draw it in the script? So that's what he did.
Right.
So the script has logograms drawn into it.
Oh, wow.
Okay, great.
Yeah, must have been a right pain in the arse to export that as a PDF.
It must have been I thought he just kind of put his coffee on the page and then lifted it up and just went, oh, that'll do.
Well, it looks like that as well,
Coffee
yeah.
cup.
Well, talking of it, the final logogram design of it being the inky circles we see, they were done by Martine Bertrand, and she's an artist and the wife of Patrice Vermette, the production designer we've just mentioned.
Family affair.
Family affair indeed. And she said that they took inspiration from squids firing ink, and as Westy has just suggested, the kind of rings that coffee cups leave on the table.
Nice.
Yeah, and the child drawings that we see in the film that Hannah does of Louise, Ian in the heptapods, they were done by Martine Bertrand's son.
Oh, wow.
All right.
Huge family affair.
Not very flattering to Ian, are they? Huge orange face. Looks like David Dickens.
Reminds me of Frank Cross. He's like, how many fingers does Mr. Santa Claus have here? It's crap. I don't want it on the walls. Stephen Wolfram and Christopher Wolfram were a father and son team who were experts in theoretical physics, and they were scientific consultants on arrival. I tell you what, a nice weekend over there will be a fucking laugh, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Christmas at the Wolframs.
I know, right? They'd be absolutely brilliant, really funny. They created a logogram Bible for the film that had over 100 words in heptapod B, and 70 of them are used in the movie.
Yeah, they didn't go quite as far as creating a whole language, but I love it when directors involve experts like the Wolframs to advise on the aspects they're experts in, so it's all like really authentic.
Yeah, it makes a massive difference.
Oh, it definitely does.
It's around this time in the film as well where Louise writes the big question on the whiteboard that Webber wants her to ask. What is your purpose on Earth? Amy Adams said that she had problems writing that on the board. This is really good. She had problems writing that on the board and looking away and talking at the same time. Midway through the first take, Villeneuve shouted, "Cut!" And Adams realised she'd written, "What is your purpose on Earth?"
Should have left that in. The great linguist.
Yeah. Imagine if they just understood that straight away and it was the film's over. Directed by Denis Villeneuve.
I like that scene though. Eric Heiserat said that originally he'd written a load of scenes where Louise teaches the heptapods basic English, but in a meeting the studio told him that it was really boring, and Heiserat got up and started demonstrating on a board in the room why language has to be taught step by step.
Yeah.
And they said, well, yeah, but what you're doing now is a far more interesting way of doing that than what you've written.
Right.
So that's where that scene came from.
Oh, okay.
We've covered a lot of stuff there, and that's just the opening of the film. We've met all of our main characters, human and heptapod, and discussed some of the creative talents on the film. Mm-hmm. Should we get into the guy overseeing all of it?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
The director.
The director of Arrival, as we mentioned, was Denis Villeneuve, a Canadian filmmaker whose directorial debut came with 1998 drama August the 32nd on Earth. Arrival was his 8th feature film overall, his 4th in Hollywood after Prisoners, Enemy and Sicario, and his first foray, but definitely not last, into science fiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Denis, Matt, how was his work on Arrival as director?
Very reminiscent to me of Ridley Scott. I mean, him in general, but particularly this one, apart from Blade Runner. I think this is the most Ridley Scott-esque film he's made because it's visually stunning. There's an epic scale to it that feels just very second nature to him. You get this sense that he isn't put off at all by how big this film gets or how big any of his films get, really.
Yeah.
And like Ridley Scott, what I think Villeneuve does really well is he makes his films a huge canvas for everyone to come and do their best work. So the soundtrack, the effects, the cinematography, the acting. Villeneuve has that ability to harness the best people around him and make everything coherent to what he wants. And he builds worlds really effectively, and he builds a human world and an alien world here. But as with Ridley Scott, I think that there's a bit of a weakness there as well. I don't think he's the most natural of storytellers. I think there's a couple of moments here that are a bit muddled in their execution. They're a bit contrived, like the group of soldiers who go rogue just to advance the narrative. I think that's a bit bumpy. And I think he always seems to have this removed to his films, which means it's hard to get a lot of emotion from him. I think he's quite a cold filmmaker. So his work here encapsulates both his best qualities but his flaws at the same time as well.
Yeah, I saw an interview with Denis Villeneuve where he said that he's wanted to make a science fiction film since he was 10 years old. Mm-hmm. So, bit of a surprise that he took 8 films to get there, but he's made up for it now, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed, yeah.
And I think one of his biggest strengths as a science fiction director is that background in drama. This feels like a fresh take on the First Contact subgenre, and as a piece of filmmaking like art, Arrival stands alone in that subgenre for me. Mm-hmm. I'm obviously a fan of Villeneuve. When you see behind-the-scenes footage from his films, and Arrival's no different, he seems to always have a very calm, serene set, and that shows on the screen. It's directed this with a very light touch, I think. Mm-hmm. And I would say maybe because of that, I agree, Matt, I find him slightly cold as a storyteller. He's not a filmmaker whose movies have a lot of heart or feeling for me sometimes, but I think he does have a lot of soul, like James Brown. Yeah, his films always have meaning, and his mastery of the craft is just world class. Mm-hmm. And that said, I would say Arrival is definitely his warmest film, I think. Obviously the subject matter of the mother-daughter bond helps, Amy Adams helps, and we'll talk about her shortly. But I think in any science fiction film, that balance of the cold, hard science and the warmth of feeling is one that filmmakers don't always get right. But here, Villeneuve nails it, and he's changed that balance from how it is in the book, so that's impressive. I think as a piece of filmmaking, Arrival is an artist at his best, and as a piece of storytelling, it makes you think and it makes you feel, as the best science fiction usually does. Mm-hmm. Whether it's his best film would be a pretty lively debate, I think, but this is definitely my favourite film of his.
Wow. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely up there for me. You guys have said it all. I mean, he is more of a handshake than he is a cuddle, isn't he? Let's be honest. That's kind of how I feel when I see his films. He's very much like of that ilk. It feels like a slow game of chess, and you know every move, and you're watching it, and you're never bored by the game. it's subtly beautiful and it's simplifying the complex, and he does that really well. He does that with the Dune novels. He makes Dune accessible. He made Blade Runner. You know, he made that sequel I don't think anyone else could have, and he's not afraid of that pace. He's not afraid of that slow pace and taking his time and just fixating on certain things. He does have, I would say, 70% more interest in the visuals than he does in anything else, because the visuals will tell the story. I think his dialogue is always secondary, I think, in all of his films. And everything does have a science fiction feel to it. I know you said there, John, it took him 8 films to get there, but Enemy for me feels very science fiction.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just a joy to watch somebody who's just so in charge of the craft. And you can tell, again, like you guys have said, that everybody on this film is in the same bracket. Nobody is lower down. Cinematography's up there with score, with sound design, with production design, with art. Everything is just given the same amount of respect. I think that's what I get from a Villeneuve film is he respects every single element that goes into his films. And that's what makes his films so satisfying, so compelling, and so perfectly judged, I think, sometimes, and really well polished. It might be cold, but I think it needs somebody who has that coldness to go, this is what I'm talking about, and take the kind of the emotion out of it a little bit. So he's getting the point across of like, look, live your best life. You haven't got a lot of time. This is what I'm trying to tell you. And he's like, your dad's sitting you down, not giving you a cuddle, but giving you a lecture. And I think that's what you need from this film.
So the first person attached to Arrival as director wasn't Denis Villeneuve. Do you know who it was?
Spielberg?
Ridley Scott?
George Lucas?
No one anywhere near that well known.
No,
it was
right.
a filmmaker called Nick Mathieu.
Nick Mathieu, right?
Yeah.
No new name on me.
He was known mostly for commercials at the time, apparently, and did later direct a Netflix science fiction film called Spectral, which is about invisible beings killing people.
Okay.
Right.
Although still quite a bizarre choice to get him in for Arrival, I think.
Yeah.
But Dan Levine and Dan Cohen from 21 Laps Entertainment, they wanted to adapt Story of Your Life and wanted Villeneuve as director because they'd loved Incendies and had a meeting with him where he talked about wanting to make a science fiction film. So they sent him the novella, and when he liked it, they sent Incendies to Ted Chiang and said, this is the guy we want to adapt your book.
Yeah, Incendies is like a post-war set film, but it's grounded, it's artistic, and the story's also non-linear, so they saw all that, I think,
Yeah, wonderful film, that. It's brilliant.
And Chang said that when he saw that, he realised that 21 Laps wanted to do it properly, as he put it, and that was a key reason he sold the rights to them. I think if you're a sci-fi author and they send you Incendies, you're going to be like, bloody hell, yeah.
Yeah, that'll do. Eric Heisserer was involved in the project before Villeneuve had written drafts of the screenplay. He said the first time he met Villeneuve was at a breakfast meeting where they talked about philosophy, science and religion for 2 hours. They did that every week, and after about a month, Villeneuve called Heisserer and said to him, I've just signed on to direct the film, and said, now we are married.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's how it works, Denis, to be honest.
It does for Villeneuve, I think.
Yeah. And we'll tell Eric Heisserer's story shortly, but Villeneuve said that when he's making a film, he's a screenwriter's best friend and also their worst enemy.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably kind of what you need to be.
I guess so, yeah. You don't take the easy way out. You want to explore all avenues, which I would imagine he's very thorough.
Oh, yeah, you can tell when you watch the film, yeah.
Definitely.
And we've talked about how Villeneuve brings crew members from his other films with him, and he did it on this as well. And he'd worked with the costume designer Renee April 3 times before as well, and he called her a master at creating character through uniforms. And it was her idea to dress Louise more colourfully in the flash-forward scenes and to reflect Louise and Ian's arcs by having them go from wearing civilian clothes to gradually wearing more militaristic outfits.
Yeah.
I always notice those military boots Louise is wearing when she has that final conversation with Costello on the ship.
Right, okay, yeah.
Pretty striking, that. And she's barefoot when we first see her at the start, so quite a big difference.
Yeah.
The main thing for me in the costume design, though, is those orange hazmat suits.
Yeah.
The contrast between the bright orange and the kind of black interiors on the alien ship, that works brilliantly.
Yeah, it does.
Really striking.
And Villeneuve said that the hazmat suits were the only time he asked for something to be changed from how it is in reality. He said normally the face of the person in the suit is mostly covered, but he had the visor changed so we can see the actors' full faces and expressions.
Well, I think you had to do that, surely, didn't
Well,
you?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the orange as well reflects the flash forwards where it's all warmer, and they've got the blue of the ships, and it's like kind of almost predicting the future that you have to wear this to get there. I think that's a really good touch.
Yeah, definitely. And have hazmat suits ever looked this good in a film?
Nah, never.
Nope.
Maybe Outbreak, but apart from that.
Yeah, yellow in that, aren't they?
Are they yellow?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember. It might just be Matt's study, I don't know. Yeah.
Before signing off on Denis Villeneuve, we have our first ATRM Patreon question.
Okay.
There are many benefits of being an ATRM patron, so you should definitely look into that if you've not yet. And one of the most popular is the chance to ask us questions that we will answer on the show. So we have the first of those now, and it is about Denis Villeneuve.
Lovely.
Cool.
So Matthew Williams is here. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Matthew.
And he has asked, where do we think Denis Villeneuve sits as a director alongside all-time great science fiction directors like Christopher Nolan, Ridley Scott, James Cameron and Stanley Kubrick? So what do you think, Matt?
You know that bit in Family Guy when Peter Griffin's talking about The Godfather?
Yes.
It insists upon itself.
It's in itself, yeah.
That's my general feeling towards Villeneuve. He insists upon himself a little bit. But in terms of sci-fi, I mean, he makes big sci-fi films, obviously. They get people's attention. My favourite Villeneuve film is actually Sicario, not one of his sci-fi ones.
Right.
But when I put him up with the other sci-fi greats, this is really good. I agree with Westy. No one else could have even attempted to make a Blade Runner sequel and then pull it off with as much aplomb as he did there. But I'm in the minority when I said I don't particularly care for the Dune films that much.
Right.
So I'm kind of split down the middle on that. Not yet. I wouldn't put him up there with the all-time sci-fi greats. But I think he's definitely got the potential to get there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when we're talking science fiction, Denis Villeneuve is already in the list of great directors for me. I mean, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, the Dune films, I'm a fan of all of them. They all have brains. They all have a soul, like James Brown. They're all films that people will be watching, I think, after we're all gone. So already a bit of a science fiction legend alongside Ridley Scott, James Cameron and Christopher Nolan for me. Outside science fiction, he does have some great films, but not enough to put him into the top tier, I don't think. Not that he's not good enough, he just needs more of them.
Yeah.
I'd like to see him direct a Western at some point.
Oh, yeah.
So, science fiction legend, absolutely. Like, all genre legend, not yet, but I think he's got every chance.
Yeah.
And Westy, where is Villeneuve's place in the Hollywood Hall of Fame for you?
I think what you have to do is look at the other directors who Matthew said here. There's Nolan, Scott, Cameron and Kubrick. And I think Nolan and Cameron are writers, they're inventors, they're world builders. Villeneuve's not in that camp. And I think he's far more subtle than Ridley Scott and Stanley Kubrick. I don't think he's got the bombast of them guys where you just kind of, who directed this? And the reason for that, and what we've said before, I think he's just more of a collaborator than he is a standalone director. I think he brings everybody in as a team. And for that reason, like you said there, John, people are going to be watching this long after we're gone. So I don't think we're ready for him yet, but our kids are going to love him.
For his work on Arrival, Denis Villeneuve was nominated for Best Director at the Oscars, and the film was nominated for Best Picture. Do you remember the winners that year?
Matt will.
Yeah, this was the infamous, was it Moonlight, was it La La Land, which one won Best Film?
Right, yeah.
It was that, yeah. So,
Damien Chazelle, Best Director for La La Land, and Best Picture went to Moonlight. As for Villeneuve and Arrival, though, no mix-ups here, and some great work from him as director.
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Some of his best.
The cast.
Denis Villeneuve was starting to make a reputation for himself with the run-up to Arrival, and as such was able to bring in some big acting names. We talked a little about Forrest Whitaker as Colonel Webber already, and are about to talk in detail about the main supporting turn of Jeremy Renner as Ian Donnelly. We should start with the lead though, probably.
Yeah.
So Amy Adams plays Dr. Louise Banks, a university lecturing linguist tasked with deciphering the alien language and communicating with the visitors. We follow her journey as she meets the heptapods, does learn their language, and as a result starts to see the future and manages to prevent all-out global warfare in the process.
Yeah.
She's a busy lady, Westy.
She is.
How is Amy Adams as Louise?
Does she even act in this? And I mean that in the nicest possible way. This feels like a linguist who's brought into a sci-fi film, as opposed to an actress who has to be a linguist. It is that believable.
Yeah.
And she's got such a range. She's wonderful in everything I've seen her in, most notably like American Hustle, Nocturnal Animals. Just a really, really wonderful actress. And like Villeneuve, I don't think she's done enough to cement her place, really, because I think, again, she's just a very subtle actress. She'll just attack whatever the project is, very, very focused, and she's absolutely perfect for this role. She owns the whole film. She carries the whole film.
Brilliant, yeah.
I mean, I could just cry at certain bits of it. I could just celebrate certain bits of it. Just that emotional vulnerability where she looks so lost in certain places.
Yeah.
But she has got this ambition, this real drive, this real energy she brings to this character, and intelligence, which I think is so rare for female characters, especially in modern day cinema, to take the centre stage and to command a film of this size, of this grandeur, and have every male character asking her for the answers. And it's a joy to watch, and I don't really think there's anyone else who I would possibly put in this role. That she totally makes the film what it is. Anyone else in this role, it's a different film completely. Only Amy Adams makes this film what it is, and that's the highest praise that I could possibly give her. She just totally makes the film, and I wouldn't have anyone else in there. I think she's fantastic.
Yeah, I totally agree. Big fan of Amy Adams. Effortless elegance in every film that she's in.
Yeah.
She's like Julie Andrews. Not as much singing, but always a touch of class.
Yeah.
She's not worked with Denis Villeneuve before, but just a perfect casting choice, I think.
You can tell they really trust each other in this film.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Really trust the direction. He really trusts her ability.
Yeah, we said that his films can sometimes feel a bit cold. That's not the case here. And a big part of that is down to Amy Adams.
Yeah, she's boiling the kettle, no problem.
Massively, yeah.
Yeah.
She's always likeable on screen. Louise is likeable. And when you see behind the scenes footage, a lot of it seems to be Amy Adams just charming the entire crew.
Yeah.
And that comes across on the screen as well.
It does.
She's so natural as Louise. It's almost like she's not acting, like you say, Westy, sometimes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And something else Villeneuve does deserve credit for is that he doesn't shy away from making films with women at the forefront of them.
Yeah,
Emily
true.
Blunt's brilliant in Sicario,
Yep.
and Amy Adams is brilliant here. Carries the whole thing without even blinking. It looks
Yeah.
easy. She usually is great, and this is up there with her best work for me.
Yeah, there's a lovely interview with them where they just sort of meet up after 8 years of making Arrival. And she says, you give us one of the best pieces of acting advice ever, when she was a bit confused about the character, and Villeneuve said, she's yours. You own her. You do whatever you want with her. She is your character.
Oh, nice.
And she's like, wow, that is just so important that I can take that character and do what I want with it. And that's what I mean about that trust between both of them. It really makes the film what it is.
Completely agree. I mean, absolute standout actress. What you get with her, I think, it's just a sense of real intelligence she brings to everything she's done. I don't think she's an actress who's ever done a role just because of the way that she looks. I think she takes interesting and challenging roles. So I think she works with big directors. She's very brave as an actress, I think. She doesn't seem to take roles just for the money. Everything's new for her and a challenge.
Yeah.
And Louise is the centre of the film, and Adams just carries that effortlessly. The tension, the worry, the drama, the joy of discovery in this film. It's all just written across her face,
Yeah.
and she grounds everything. And yeah, to go back to that point about Villeneuve and strong female leads, I like the fact it's never an issue or remarked upon that Louise is a woman, but the authority here, it's just not even an issue. Webber never mentioned it, and I think that's for the best. That would feel like a false note if someone tried to bring that up. So yeah, just impeccable work from her.
Yeah, there was that massive moment where the last person was taken out in the medevac. And it could have been like, he's a bloke, he couldn't handle it, we need a woman's touch. Then they could have played that in, but they definitely didn't. It's just you don't know who was there before, and she's doing a better job, and it doesn't matter what sex she is. I think that's just really, really important.
Yeah.
Well, at this point in our episodes, we normally like to tell the story of which actors were almost cast in certain roles. Jennifer Jason Leigh, Tom Selleck, all that kind of stuff.
Selleck would have been great as Louise. He was in the medevac, wasn't he? Just the tap.
Yeah, well, we can't hear, though, because literally every lead actor in the film was the person who Villeneuve originally wanted.
Right, brilliant.
Yeah, so Tom Selleck didn't turn on the part of Ian, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a shame. Ian Tash instead of Ian Wogs. It would have been fantastic.
Yeah, because Villeneuve said casting Arrival was the easiest thing in my career because everybody fell in love with the screenplay. And as you've said, Adams was just the first choice to play Louise. But interestingly, she'd actually been planning to take a break from acting at the time because she wanted to spend time with her 5-year-old daughter. But Adams said the Arrival script just grabbed her within the first 15 pages. She loved the fact that Louise was a mother, she was intelligent, and she accepted the part within a couple of days, and that break she wanted to take, she put that on hold till after this was done.
Yeah, Villeneuve said she was the first and only choice. No other name was ever even mentioned because she accepted so quickly.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, if you want someone who can carry the film, come across as likeable, intelligent and warm, yeah, get Amy Adams.
Get Amy Adams, who else do you need?
If you can. Everything, To prepare for the part of Louise, Adams learned some basic Mandarin, and Louise had to speak it at the end of the film. And she also spent time with real-life linguist called Jessica Kuhn from McGill University in Montreal. She helped Adams understand how a linguist would think and act in certain situations, and Adams said the 2 months she spent learning didn't even scratch the surface of what Jessica Kuhn knew. Amazing.
Yeah. Jessica Kuhn advised on changing some of Louise's dialogue as well, and she was consulted on using the whiteboards to communicate with the heptapods, when she writes human on it, and how they annotate the logograms as well that we see in the film. I mean, again, Villeneuve wanted authenticity, which I think's all for the best.
Yeah, and he got it.
For her performance as Louise, Amy Adams received no recognition at the Oscars, not nominated.
Wow.
Surprised by that?
Shower of shit.
Very surprised.
Yeah. Emma Stone won that year for La La Land.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For us, though, sounds like we think Amy Adams is pretty great in leading Arrival.
absolutely.
Perfect.
100%.
Yeah.
The main supporting character in Arrival is Dr. Ian Donnelly, played by Jeremy Renner, a theoretical physicist recruited to work with Louise in communicating with the heptapods. Ian walks, comes up with the names for Abbott and Costello, manages to work out the heptapods tapestry is one pattern of 12, and we find out is the father of Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He thinks the cornerstone of civilization is science, Matt, and as far as the film's concerned, he's wrong.
He is wrong.
How's Jeremy Renner, though, as Ian?
Very dependable.
Yeah.
He's always very dependable. Jeremy Renner, I think
He
he's
is.
just that
He is.
archetypal supporting actor from Avengers, Mission Impossible, The Town. Very different films tonally and in terms of who he's playing, but the common theme is this guy won't let you down. This guy will have you back. And Renner exemplifies that really well. I think his character could be given a bit more depth. He is kind of generic, good, faithful man for most of it here. And I know that's a decision taken because there's limited time to get in depth with these characters, but I think the ending would hit harder if we got to know Ian a bit more than we do. Particularly when, Renner is capable of a lot more notes than he gets given here. If you think of him in The Hurt Locker, for example, he brings so much depth to that role.
Yeah, he really does. 28 weeks later as well.
20 weeks later as well, yeah, so much nuance. So he could be given a bit more to do, but it is a good performance, I think. Like, Adams completely sells the intelligence of his character. And I just like how he's really comfortable supporting Amy Adams in this. There's no ego here. There's no sexism. He's not trying to steal the limelight. He's not trying to make a big discovery, like his big moment to shine. He knows it's her story, and he's fine with his place in it, and he does that well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Ian is a supporting character to the lead of Louise, and that's very much how he's written. He's like a foil for Louise. In that balance of warmth and science the film goes for, Ian is the science. Loves a math problem.
Yeah, he does like.
Yeah. The opposite of me.
And his character demonstrates the importance of different disciplines and being able to collaborate, something Villeneuve's obviously interested in because, like we say, he is a very collaborative director. And Ian is a good character, but there's not much to him on the page. We know nothing about him. He's a plot device, essentially. He's basically there for Louise to have a baby with. And that's a shame because it's not a long film. The runtime's under 2 hours. So there was some room to explore Ian a bit more, maybe. Aside from deciphering the tapestry that I mentioned, he doesn't actually do anything of any use to anybody. So I do find what Renner does quite impressive because I do like Ian in the film.
Yeah.
Needs a bit more to do, but it is better for him being there. Mr. Dependable, like you say, Matt.
Yeah.
I think the thing that we've got to look at as well is how the gender roles are reversed in this film. You normally have the male who takes the lead and he's the linguist and he knows everything, and you've got the female who's the scientist who hangs around in the background.
Yeah.
That's what's wonderful about this. And then you normally have the female character who's just there to have the baby. And I think it is a shame that Renner doesn't get more to do, but then there is that real risk of if he has more to do, you question his character's motives and then you question her decision at the end to be with him and have the child with him. So you've got to keep him as basic as possible because that needs to happen. You need to buy into that relationship.
Yeah.
And I think if he does anything else and questions anything or ruffles any feathers to the audience, then they're going to think, well, why did you choose him? He did this. So they kind of just keep him very, very stable, very much on the page, does everything right. He's a fairy tale, isn't he? He's like Prince Charming. And Renner understands that. I think he totally gets that and he runs with it, and he's quite happy to sit in the background and be the person who she chooses at the end because that's what the film's about. It's about choice. It's not about his character, it's about her character.
Yeah.
That's the reason he hasn't got much to do.
Yeah, and as with Amy Adams as Louise, Jeremy Renner was the first person Villeneuve wanted to play Ian. He said that he and Renner had met before and were talking about working together, and added, "It's very unusual to cast Jeremy Renner in the role of an intellectual."
Bit harsh on Renner.
Yeah.
Backhanded compliment, isn't it?
Thanks, I think.
Yeah, Villeneuve said that Renner was more used to playing Bourne and James Bond type characters.
Yeah.
So he said that on the set he'd have to be jumping around because he needed to release some energy.
Yeah.
Sounds like a toddler.
And like we've said, I mean, Renner said himself that when he read the script, he knew there wasn't much in there for him to do. I mean, he's not stupid. We all know this.
Yeah.
But he said he really wanted to work with Amy Adams again after working with her on American Hustle.
Oh, yeah.
He said it was a phenomenal part for Amy and a phenomenal part for a woman, and I was interested in supporting her and supporting that. Which
Fair play.
It's brilliant. Yeah, he knows it, and fine.
Yeah.
Selfless man. He is like Bourne.
He is. He's like Ian.
But yeah, I think Renner and Adams are very close as friends in real life, apparently.
Yeah, you can tell, yeah.
And Villeneuve must have been keen to get him too, because production was scheduled to begin based on when Renner was available, because he was filming Captain America Civil War at the time as Hawkeye, yeah.
Okay.
Right, okay.
No Oscars for Jeremy Renner as Ian. Imagine. Nothing for Adams.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a really good supporting actor, let's be honest.
Well, Best Supporting Actor went to Mahershala Ali for Moonlight.
Right.
Yes.
Fair enough, they beat Renner, I think.
Yeah, makes sense.
Definitely right.
Yeah, I mean, he had about 16 more lines than Renner.
But yeah, very much a supporting turn. But we like Jeremy Renner as Ian.
Yeah, yes, he's really
I think he's great.
Yeah.
He does exactly what he needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our main two cast members. We've already mentioned Forrest Whitaker and have some information on one or two other cast members to come. But it is all about our two leads, really.
Yeah.
And great lead and support performances from Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner.
Yeah.
Yes, lovely.
All the Right Movies will be back shortly. Thank you for supporting us by listening to this episode's sponsors. Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
The middle.
Heading into the middle of Arrival, and the sessions between Louise, Ian and the heptapods grow more intense. We're going to be talking in the scenes where a group of soldiers go rogue and plant a bomb in the alien ship. Before that, though, there's some friendlier moments to discuss.
There are.
So, having made the initial breakthrough with the heptapods, Louise gets to work deciphering the language. We get a little montage when Ian explains what the humans have learned so far, but not before Louise gets the aliens' names out of them.
Right.
Now, that is a proper introduction, Matt.
It really is.
So how are these sessions for you?
I mean, it's a great session, but what's Webber doing? Being on their case here? Like, perhaps we should move on to the next word. Like, calm down, mate. They've been there 5 minutes.
I know, let her do her job.
Give them a bit of time. But I love how there's been this pent-up frustration from Louise and not being able to make that breakthrough, and that culminates with her taking the hazmat suit off. And that feels like such a big moment. You can hear the panic in the military voices in the background.
Massive.
But again, I just love how it's her leading the way here. And it's Ian who follows her example in a bit. And I think the point is, face-to-face communication is always better. Like, the heptapods might not have a face as we would understand it, but all the same, it's just important. You know, if you were talking to someone in a mask, you would feel more comfortable when that mask comes off. And I think that's what she realises here, and that's why this one's important. And it just feels like there's a real shift in the balance of power here, because it's Louise who makes the breakthrough. She's now completely justified her presence there. And I just love that shot of Louise where she's framed between the two heptapods and then placing her hand on the barrier, which the heptapod does in response. Really iconic. But the last thing that strikes me about the scene is when Ian takes his suit off and he says, "Everybody dies, right?" Very prophetic. No one wants to come.
Yeah, he only takes half of it off as well. I think that's quite important for the character. He doesn't fully commit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's hard as nails, Louise, isn't she? Just strips off. It's great. But again, it's all beautifully shot. Again, I find it quite moving, seeing Louise making this bond with Abbott and Costello. But, and importantly, I think, it's around this time that we'll see Louise get her first flash forward, when she sees Hannah with what I think's a horse. It's all in silhouette.
Yeah.
And we'll see her sitting in the long grass and by the lake. And obviously, we're taking these as flashbacks at first. One of my favourite things Villeneuve does in the film, that there's a clear theme of language. The whole premise is based around Louise learning the heptapods language. That's there in the writing from the original story. But the genius touch Villeneuve brings is how he reflects that by playing around with the language of cinema as well, to control and then reveal the twist.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that if we cut from a scene of Louise playing with Hannah in the garden to a reaction shot of Louise in a different place, that was a flashback. It's like the Kuleshov effect.
It is a Kuleshov effect, yeah.
And Villeneuve played with it, because they're not flashbacks, they're flash forwards. Simple, but brilliant way of doing it.
Yeah.
And it's all there once you know. On rewatches, it's clear as day that Louise doesn't understand what these memories are.
Yeah.
It's really obvious.
Yeah.
But we never even see it the first time around. And Villeneuve adapting a story about written language and developing that to include the language of cinema, that is brilliant.
It is. It's great. It's Amy Adams' performance and how you can take confusion and sorrow and it makes the same kind of expression.
Yeah.
Because you don't understand sorrow, really, so you can be confused about the pain that you're feeling. That works as well. The Kuleshov effect, it's wonderfully done. Wonderfully done.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a master, isn't he? He understands cinema.
Yeah.
But in the book, Louise names the heptapods Flapper and Raspberry.
Rubbish names.
Terrible
Not as
names.
That's good.
Not good at
Little,
all.
little large if I had my way.
Well, the inspiration is because of the noises they make with their spoken language.
Right.
But obviously in the film, as we've said, Ian suggests Abbott and Costello instead. And that, obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, they were famous comedy double act, Bud Abbott, Lou Costello. And their most famous routine is Who's on First, where there's lots of mixed communication between them.
Yeah, who's on first base? Who's on first base?
Who's on first
Yeah,
base?
it's who.
Yeah, but who's on first base? Yeah.
Who's on second base? No, who's on first? All
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Great, yeah. Massive influence on like Malcolm and Wise as well. I
Yeah.
think it's a similar kind of vibe. Similar.
And in the Italian version of the film, they were concerned that audiences wouldn't know who Abbott and Costello were.
All right.
So you know what they named the heptapods?
Malcolm and Wise. Eric and Ernie.
No.
Should have done.
It was Tom and Jerry.
All right, okay.
right.
And the Sheena Easton reference, where Ian says she had a hit in the 80s in each of the ship's landing sites,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's changed for the Italians to Pink Floyd. as well.
Is it?
Yeah, not the three tenors.
Right.
Right. Massive in Devon, Floyd. And here we're going to the moment that I really enjoy this part of the film because it comes in at around 52 minutes, so we're pretty close to halfway, and it feels like a bit of an intermission. It feels like a bit of, here's what we don't know.
Yeah.
And I love that as a voiceover. That's really good. And there's a really lovely shine here is when the soundtrack starts to really make itself known. It's just been atmospheric up until this point, but then it really works together with it, and you find out that the heptapods are really peaceful. There's no radiation, no gas, no waste. We could do with them right about now, if I'm completely honest with you.
Yeah.
All these great questions. Are the scientists or are the tourists?
Yeah.
Lovely collection of images, a great montage sequence. And I just love the way that the dialogue doesn't dial it down. You know, the non-linear orthography, all that, no sense of time. Just a wonderful moment where everything starts to kind of come together, but not in a cheesy way, in an absolutely necessary middle of the film montage kind of intermission. This is us as characters, as people in this film saying this is what we do not understand, and I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I do enjoy a good montage. I think this one works great. I think it's really good.
Yeah.
It is nice that Ian gets a moment in the sun doing the voiceover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the clips that we see are basically all longer scenes from the book condensed into just a few seconds. So
Right.
nice references for the Ted Chiang fans.
Yeah, it's a nice nod for that.
Yeah, but that YouTuber we see, Richard Riley, he's called in the film, played by Mark Camacho, who's like, the smartest thing we could do right now is give them a show of force. A shot across the bow. I can't stand that guy.
Yeah.
Depressingly familiar that now as well.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And then straight after that, there's that scene where Louise and Ian are on the back of the truck. Ian just slips in that he's single and gets Louise to confirm that she is as well. He's not daft after all, is he?
Very subtle.
Really scientific.
Oh, that's why you're single then.
Communication, you know.
And actually, the montage wasn't in the script originally, and neither was the dream sequence where Louise sees the heptapod in her room. That was originally a conversation between Louise, Ian and Webber that Villeneuve removed, but he had to keep it because it was the only scene that mentioned the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which kind of explains how Louise starts to see the future.
Yeah, we'll explain the hypothesis a little bit later, but that shot of the heptapod in the corner, it's like the end of Enemy by Villeneuve, isn't it?
It is, yeah, definitely.
Where J. Gyllenhaal sees the massive spider.
Yeah.
Should have ended with a heptapod in Enemy. Imagine that. What the hell is that? Cut to black.
He would have in hindsight if it had been designed.
Yeah, it would
Only
be great.
slightly less confusing than the actual ending.
Some nice scenes there then, a nice bonding session, then a nice montage. Events are about to take a bit of a turn though.
Yeah.
Sure are.
Things are heating up. With nobody close to finding out why the heptapods are here, tensions between the world governments grow. Webber has Louise ask the big question, and when they don't like the answer, China break communication, followed by Russia and a group of US soldiers detonate a bomb in the heptapod ship.
Yes.
Off our weapon mat. Bit vague from the heptapods, that.
A little bit, yeah. Put some effort in, lads.
They've just learned English. Give them a break.
How does it play out for you?
The build-up to that next session is really excellent. We find out China's escalating the situation. I love that conversation we get between Louise and Webber after she's listened to the recording and she realises they're talking in terms of mahjong.
Yeah.
And it leads to that great exchange. If all I ever gave you was a hammer, everything's a nail. I mean, it just distills the whole situation brilliantly.
Great.
And it just sums up that inherent danger of misunderstanding something, which obviously we get when she goes up there and they say off a weapon, which is, you know, the least useful thing they could say, to be honest, in that situation. I mean, I think the film takes a bit of a leap that we're at the point where they would understand a noun such as weapon, but I'm so engaged with the story at this point, it's fine, I'll go with it. And then it leads to another dialogue scene which I really like, which is the one with helping the CIA agent, where they're trying to work out what the intention is. And the interesting thing for me about this character, he's not a warmongering idiot. He knows his history. He mentions the British in India, Germans in Rwanda did the same thing, and that's what he fears, history repeating itself. So you understand his motivation. And then I do love that line about, we live in a world with no single leader. How do you communicate with us? I think that's great as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been banging on about this big question for the whole film, and then when they don't like the answer, everyone goes absolutely mental.
Yeah.
And yeah, Agent Halpern, the CIA operative, starts to come into it. Just stays apart him. Captain America.
Just wants a war, doesn't he?
Yeah, he mentions the British in India and the Germans in Rwanda. I mean, yeah, fine. But the US are squeaky clean, are they?
Yeah.
No skeletons in their closet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Halpern's like, never trust anyone, ever. He is an important character, though. Really ups the conflict in the camp.
Yeah.
I do think it's quite funny when Louise is just like, do I have to talk to this guy? Totally sick of his crap.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And Halpern is played by Michael Stuhlbarg, and Villeneuve cast him after seeing him in A Serious Man by the Coen brothers, and I always forget that film exists, to be honest.
It's really good.
It's really
it's
good.
brilliant.
Film. And he's brilliant in it.
He's wonderful in it.
Yeah.
And to prepare for the role, Stuhlbarg met with a real CIA agent who told him to read a book called Fair Play by an ex-CIA agent called James Olsen that explored the kind of moral dilemmas spies have to face.
Yeah, I think he's good in the film, Michael Stuhlbarg.
He's great in the film, yeah.
I'm not sure Halpern's suffering much of a moral dilemma, though. It'd be Starship Troopers if it was up to him. Kill them all!
Yeah, I mean, talking about kill 'em all, here we go. It's kind of the panic, I guess, that we're seeing on the screens. And the great thing about this is that throughout this whole film, the action film, the sci-fi action film, has been happening somewhere else. We are with the scientists, and it's normally the other way around. We're with the action, and we're waiting for the scientists to figure this out, to give us the code to defuse it all.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Independence Day is happening somewhere else, and we are now with the people trying to figure it out. And to be perfectly honest, I prefer this camp.
Oh,
I'd
yeah,
rather
me
be
too
here.
as well.
Just talk it through. Let's see,
Yeah.
let's just everyone calm down. And that's where these things, it meets and it boils over, because they are trained to destroy any threat. They aren't trained to be linguists, they aren't trained to be scientists. Like Matt said, it is a little bit bumbly, it is a little bit heavy-handed. But I mean, yeah, this is kind of where it dips for me slightly in the plot, because you would give them a little bit more of a chance. You wouldn't just hear one word weapon and then that's it, right? Everything just down tools, go back in, what do they mean? For me, it's the way that this is built, the way the tension's built. And you think, oh, this is the longest 10 minutes that this bomb's ever going to go off. But it actually takes 5 minutes to go off.
Yeah.
So Villeneuve cuts it in half. He could have actually really drawn this out, but he does it quite quickly. And I love the way the heptapods are reacting to this. They're knocking on the glass. They know what's going to happen. Everything's circular. They don't see time the same way we do, which means that Abbott knows that he's going to die. And he's known all the way through, which means that's why he's really quiet in the whole film.
Depressed.
No, he's just at the back just going, why the fuck do I have to do this again, Costello? But he knows it. Costello's like, and that's why Abbott pushes everything forward and shows them everything at once, because he knows what has to happen, and he knows he has to sacrifice himself, which is the same way that Amy Adams has to make that choice and make that sacrifice to move forward, which I'll get into later with a little bit of a theory later on.
Okay.
Oh, lovely.
It's just the way that this is done, and the whole desperation of trying to figure this out without any violence, and the violence is always there, and it's boiling in the background, and you cannot escape it. And that's what Villeneuve's saying, is like, no matter how much intelligence, no matter how much patience you've got, there's always going to be violence in the world. And that's what we get from this whole sequence, and it's just awesomely done. Beautiful countdown, and I just love the bit when Abbott just hits the glass and they just fly backwards, and there's that
great.
push, and it's boom, bomb goes off, doors shut, and then we're like, right, that's it. And this sequence could have been a lot bigger than it was. It could have been, right, I'm doing this, and I'm putting all this action into it. Doesn't do it, keeps it grounded, keeps it level, keeps his head, keeps the film rolling. Perfect.
Yeah, I like how we see the ticking clock all the way through the scene.
Yeah.
The first time I saw the film, I was like, they've not put a bomb on there, surely, have they?
Yeah.
Outrageous behaviour from these mutineers.
It's brilliant the way that's revealed as well. You see the writing on the side, it's illuminated. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's great, yeah. But they've no idea at all how the heptapods will react. So they might blow the whole planet up, for all they know.
Yeah, exactly.
It is really well judged by Villeneuve, though, I think. Adds a bit of spectacle and action to the story without going too crazy with it.
Yeah.
I love the moment the heptapods essentially turn off the kind of fake gravity, so Louise and Ian just fall back down the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the sound design to cut from silence to the explosion is brilliant. And again, the context changes on a rewatch. The heptapods don't save Louise out of generosity. It's presumably because they know the future and that she's the one who ends up deciphering their language. That's why they save her.
Yeah.
And the flash forward just after this is maybe the key one for me. It's the non-zero sum game.
Yes.
The first time they have a flashback doesn't make sense because Louise uses knowledge in the flashback that she doesn't learn until later.
Yeah.
I think it's really clever, to be honest. And that phrase, non-zero sum game, forever linked with Arrival for me.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, first time I've heard it and probably the last time I've heard it. I'm not going to hear that on my day-to-day travels, am I?
Yeah, it's not catchy, is it?
I love that flash forward as well when she's like, you want science, call your father.
Yeah, great.
It's on the page, it's right in front of you.
Yeah.
Yes, I do find it a bit contrived to get to this point in terms of the narrative, but just in terms of the filmmaking, though, it's just incredibly well done. It's extremely tense. It's really well put together. And we've talked about that explosion. That was created with a blend of practical and digital effects. So stuntmen were filmed against a blue screen in harness rigs and were filmed being yanked backwards to create the effect of gravity switching off with the explosion then added digitally.
Looks fantastic.
It does. They get a really good blend of digital and practical effects in this, I think.
All the way through the film, yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the middle section of Arrival, and the story has moved on quite a bit. Louise is getting closer to figuring out what's happening, while the military are getting closer to starting interstellar warfare. It's all pretty engaging stuff.
Really engaging, yep.
Yep, and it's all a matter of time.
Oh, there he is.
The crew.
The team behind the scenes on Arrival was a mix of long-time Denis Villeneuve collaborators and some first-time partnerships. That's where we're headed now as we talk the music on the film, the visuals we see on screen, and, first of all, the writing of the movie. Mm-hmm. The credited screenwriter on Arrival, then, is Eric Heisserer, adapting Ted Chiang's novella Story of Your Life. Starting his career as a video game writer, Heisserer broke into Hollywood in the mid-2000s and, at the time of Arrival, had built a name for himself in the horror genre mainly, writing the A Nightmare on Elm Street remake, Final Destination 5, The Thing reboot, and Lights Out.
Right, okay. I mean, the last two I can get on board with.
Possibly not the guy you'd be expecting to write a cerebral science fiction script then, Matt.
No.
But how was the writing on Arrival?
I mean, kudos to him, really, to come from that background. And what he does is he takes that alien contact concept and just goes in a very different direction with it. This is much more the day the Earth stood still than it is Independence Day, which I think we should all be very grateful for.
Absolutely.
And because of that approach, it does take that inherent concept really seriously. If aliens did land and they can't speak English, how would we learn to communicate with them? And how the film tackles that is the part of the writing that I really, really enjoy. When Louise breaks down the problems they're facing in terms of communicating, in terms of how do you even begin to define the most simple of concepts, both in their terms and then from them to us, that's all really fascinating. You know, I really do love watching films where it's intelligent people solving problems intelligently. That's really gripping to me.
And you feel like you're learning something at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
You do, but in this, you don't feel you're being talked down to while you're learning.
Exactly.
You know, it does treat you with a bit of respect, and it does try to tackle big themes at the same time. I've seen this film get called profound a lot. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying that it's profound. It's kind of message at the end. Things would be better if we all communicated a bit better. That's not the deepest message I've ever heard in a film, but it's explored well. So I think the fundamental problem of the language barrier they've got to overcome, that's explored really, really well, and that's the highlight of the writing for me.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot going on with the writing. I think it's an original take on the First Contact movie in that it focuses on the part of First Contact that movies usually skip straight past, learning how to communicate with an alien species. It's also a pretty fresh take on the time travel movie. Louise develops memories of the future, which is quite interesting, and there's a lot of themes. There's a theme of language, a theme of collaboration, a theme of context versus perception. The theme that interests me most, though, is the exploration of determinism. The question of, do we have free will, or is everything that happens inevitable, and free will is just an illusion? The whole idea of Louise having memories of the future suggests that the film is saying, yes, everything's set in advance, and that's definitely the angle the book takes. In the book, Louise basically says, once you know what the future is, you would never conceive of doing anything differently. And she and the heptapods kind of play out scenes knowing what's going to happen. In the film, though, it is more nuanced, and Louise does demonstrate free will. She makes the choice to have Hannah, even though she knows she'll be taken by terminal illness. I mean, that's why Ian leaves her at the end, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because she made that choice. And that's a more interesting question to me. Would you have your child if you know the pain coming when she dies very young? Mm-hmm. These questions are all raised in the film, but even beyond that, it's still an interesting, relatable story about human relationships or an interesting take on what first contact might look like.
Yeah.
Doing all those things at once and without being confusing, I think it's science fiction writing at its best, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's great that he gives every character their moment and everyone is quite well-rounded and you know who everybody is and there's no cliches in here. Like I've said before, keeps all the action off screen. If this was anyone else adapting this novel, it would be, we've made contact with the aliens and they've mentioned weapon. Now we're going to get Will Smith involved and now the film starts.
Yeah.
I think the whole point of this is a very human story and it is very subtle in its delivery. And the whole point is, you've got no control over your future, and irregardless of free will or not, would you have that love if you know it's going to end in sadness? It always is going to end in sadness. Everything ends. But you just don't know when it's going to end. So the choices that you make, are you just going to close yourself away from enjoying life because of what happens at the end? Or are you going to accept that the love completely outweighs the pain of the sadness that comes later? And that's what I get from this film. It lands you in the moment where you just go, actually, shit, yeah, I really need to start enjoying where I am and what I've got because it could be gone at any minute. And if you know that it's going to be gone, you'd still choose to have it.
Yeah.
You know, it has that message. It's better to have loved than lost than to never loved at all. And
It is that classic message, isn't it?
it is,
Yeah.
and it addresses that message really, really well. And what Villeneuve does is he doesn't sugarcoat that. He doesn't candy cane it. He doesn't make it schmaltzy. He doesn't make it over-the-top romantic. It's a very human story. It's very subtle. And I think all of that is grounded in the writing, and that's what it's trying to say. And that's what it ultimately delivers on the page as well as on the screen.
So the story of Arrival didn't start with Denis Villeneuve. It actually started with Eric Heisserer. We've just told it non-linear, like the film. So he came across another Ted Chiang story called Understand, which is about a guy who develops like superhuman intelligence. From that, he found Story of Your Life and became kind of obsessed with it. He then had a meeting with Dan Levine and Dan Cohn at 21 Laps Entertainment because they wanted to work with him.
Right.
They pitched him ideas apparently for 2 hours and he said no to all of them. So eventually they said, all right then, well, what do you want to do? And he basically said, have you read Story of Your Life? I kind of imagine him pulling it out of his sleeve like Ron Burgundy with that flute. I wasn't prepared at all.
I wasn't prepared. I really wasn't. Underneath the toilet, just reading the book.
So Levine and Cohen then read the book, loved it, and said, yep, we're in. So the three of them got Ted Chiang on board, pitched the idea to studios, but nobody was interested. So Heisserer said, nobody's going to buy it until they read the script. So he went off and wrote the film as a spec script.
Risky business.
Very risky, but 21 Laps also brought in 2 other production companies, Film Nation Entertainment and Lava Bear Films, to help raise funding. And then when they pitched the idea and scripted the Cannes film market in 2014, 5 studios sorted a bid more, which was then won by Paramount.
Right.
Yeah, Heisserer said that when they did those initial pitches without a script, they got some conditional offers, but it was stuff like, can you change the lead to a man?
Yeah.
You change it completely, please. Yeah.
And one studio apparently said, why not change it to an alien invasion movie and have someone punch the alien in the face?
Oh, really?
Welcome to Earth.
Why don't we call it Departure? The film's original title was Story of Your Life, like the book, but One Direction stole that, so then Villeneuve thought, well, I have to change it. But when Villeneuve came on board, he didn't like it, as he thought it sounded too much like a rom-com, which is totally fair enough.
Yeah,
so they
does,
brainstormed hundreds of titles and ended up agreeing on the first one that they came up with, which was Arrival.
Yeah, it's much better for a film, isn't it?
Miles
It's
better.
Snappy.
Yeah. Not to be confused with The Arrival from 1996, where Charlie Sheen discovers an alien signal and finds out aliens have been here all along.
Oh, right, yeah, totally
Yeah,
forgot about
remember
that film. Yeah, Jesus, yeah.
And the film is a pretty faithful adaptation of the Story of Your Life, but there were some changes. Some we've mentioned, but there were others too. So in the book, the scientist is called Gary Donnelly, which is then changed to Ian Donnelly in the film. And he does play a large role in the book in terms of deciphering the heptapod language. Colonel Webber, however, plays a large role in the film, because in the book he's only in a scene at the start and then one at the end.
Right.
Yeah, again, Ian's a better name, isn't it, Westy?
Absolutely. Your middle name's Gary.
Is it really?
Is it, fuck?
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't know that.
Gary!
Could have gone with Declan Donnelly. That would have been good.
Yeah.
Called the heptapods PJ and Duncan.
Also in the book, it's 112 heptapod ships that turn up worldwide, not just 12. Heisserer said the change is to reflect the theme of time in the film. 12 hours on the clock, 12 ships.
Yes.
Also, 112 is far too many.
Yeah.
They'd be turning up everywhere.
Yeah.
People wouldn't see him much.
Yeah, they would. Me and Luke trying to communicate with it wouldn't go very well.
Imagine that.
There probably is one in Seam and no one's noticed, to be honest.
The one from Alien 3, that's the one that's in Seam.
Still there. Yeah.
Still there, yeah. Also in the book, the military are not in contact with China, Russia, or anybody else around the world. It's all just contained within the Montana base, and there's actually no threat of global war over the events.
Right?
Yeah, change for the best, surely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Although I do like how, even in the film, it's this world-changing event, but we only ever see glimpses of the effects around the world.
Yeah.
Riots in the UK, obviously.
Obviously, yeah, any excuse.
They're all in V for Vendetta masks.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. But, it's fairly close, isn't it?
Yeah,
Well, yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately.
But maybe the biggest change, though, is around Hannah, because she's never named in the book and doesn't die of a terminal illness as a teenager. Instead, she dies in a rock climbing accident when she's 25. And one of the reasons they changed Hannah's age is because it would have meant they had aged Amy Adams in the flash forwards.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Which would have given away the twist.
Yeah.
Obviously, yeah. But that is a massive change. It changes the message of the story, because a rock climbing accident is totally preventable. Just tell her not to go.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the book, Louise still doesn't stop it, even when she knows it's going to happen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's kind of saying we don't have free will, which the film doesn't say that.
Right, that gets a bit more complicated, doesn't it? Really, if you try and put that on the screen. But then again, they could have told her how to control gravity, and then when she falls, she could have just changed it.
Yeah. That would have been quite good, actually.
That would have been great. We mentioned the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis earlier, and that is the basis of the idea. It's a theory that says that language can determine thought processes. So, depending on the language you speak, it might influence how you perceive things or think about things. And in the case of the film, learning heptapod rewires Louise's brain so she's able to see the future, basically.
Yeah, that theory goes back to the 1920s. Apparently, Edward Sapir and Benjamin Whorf were the linguists.
Yeah.
I don't think it's taken all that seriously nowadays, from what I've read. But in the short story, they talk about Fermat's principle of least time as well, to explain how the time leaps work. So Ted Chiang is clearly a big science guy and did his research. The film has a much lighter touch in comparison.
Yeah.
No science lectures from Ian, thankfully.
No, thankfully. I kind of buy into that, though. What language you speak kind of does determine how you think about certain things.
It is interesting, yeah.
It is really interesting. Now, if you speak Geordie, then all you see is pasties flying about. And
That's where Greg's came from.
where Greg's came from, yeah. 12 Gregs popped up first. Originally called Gary's.
And the narrative is told out of sequence, like we've been talking about. And the first and the last scenes play one after the other. So if all the scenes in the film were played out chronologically, the shot of Louise walking down the hospital corridor after Hannah dies would be the final scene.
Yeah.
In the film, it's followed immediately by Louise walking into the university, which would be the first scene.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. They basically tell us the whole story in the first 5 minutes of the film. We just don't know what it is we're watching at the time. We have to learn how to decipher it, which is the same kind of journey Louise goes on in learning heptapod.
Yes.
That's fantastic writing, that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah.
For his work in writing Arrival, Eric Heisserer was Oscar nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, lost out to Barry Jenkins and Moonlight.
Right. Yeah, it swept, didn't it, Moonlight? That swept the whole board.
And for us, some brilliant writing on Arrival.
Yeah.
From a first-time Denis Villeneuve collaborator and Eric Heisserer, we're moving on to a DV regular in the music.
Yeah.
The score for Arrival was written by Johan Johansson, an Icelandic composer working with Villeneuve for the third time, having created the scores for Prisoners and Sicario.
Yeah.
DV and JJ together again then, Matt. How was the music on Arrival?
Definitely more of a score than a soundtrack, because to me a soundtrack means something that has themes and motifs that stick in your head and you can hum them days afterwards. Apart from the Max Richter piece, this definitely isn't that. I think it's a score designed to accentuate everything else. It's easy to overlook it now because of the amount of films about the subject, but fundamentally, if you think about if aliens were to land on Earth, it would be the single most terrifying moment ever. And just because these aliens don't seem intent on harm to begin with doesn't change that. And the score reflects that totally.
Yeah.
It's very tense. It gets you on edge. That first trip into the ship, that is scored like a horror film. It's like something out of The Shining, that music there. So it's absolutely the kind of score the film needs. I think it's a wonderful piece of work.
I agree. I think it's a great score. And when you see behind-the-scenes stuff from how Johansson created it all, it's pretty impossible to not be impressed with how creative they were in recording the sound and then mixing them as well. And I mean, Villeneuve directs the film with a very deft touch all the way through. So Johansson has to reflect that with the music, which he does. It's all soft percussion, ambient, delicate strings. He creates a mood rather than a melody, which I think is what we need for those shots of the alien ship that are meant to be awe-inspiring, and they are. But also, this is a film about aliens, and Johansson reflects that as well. There's some noises and arrangements which are just bizarre. Like that swell in the score that you're talking about, Matt, when the heptapods first appear.
Yeah.
How good's that? It's just perfect.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
terrifying.
Weird, but grounded,
Yeah.
Not something that leaps out immediately, maybe, the music, but on rewatches, which this film kind of demands, I think it just gets better every time. It's superb.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad one for me. This guy just was taken far too young, I think.
Yeah.
48.
That's right, yeah.
And I think he had a lot more to offer and a lot more to give. And I think on reflection of this film alone, the way he just creates texture and the use of long notes and the use of voices that he brings into it, and it just brings this whole palette that totally supports the visuals. I think he was an incredible talent.
Yeah, he was.
He was a very understated artist in that he was an ideal collaborator, especially for Villeneuve, and that he wasn't a John Williams, he wasn't a Hans Zimmer, and they brought him, I mean, he started Blade Runner 2049 and they brought Zimmer in to finish it because they needed something else. And I think his strengths lie in what you hear in this film. I think this is his kind of magnum opus, really. It's a real celebration for me of this guy's art and his talent. You know, the montage sequence that I spoke about, that's incredibly emotive. And at the end credits where it just comes with them voices.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting thinking about everything and then the voices are in your head and it really resonates with me. That's just so clever and really sets up the texture of the film in that you can shoot this over darkness and it still has a personality and it just ties together beautifully. It's just the bow on top for me. And without this score, I don't think it would be anywhere near as ominous or as haunting or as memorable.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, he is a real artist, isn't he?
Yeah,
Johan
he
Johansson.
was, yeah, amazing.
And usually the director puts together a first cut of the film before he hands it to the composer to lay the music over the top. But Johansson said he started writing and recording the score for Arrival before the movie had even started filming, and that's how he'd always worked with Villeneuve. So Johansson set an iPhone recording of what he was doing a week before filming started as proof of concept, and Villeneuve replied, "Sounds great, keep going with that."
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, he had concept art for the ships and the script, which had those sketches of the logograms in that we talked about.
Yeah.
And he kind of reflected that by using a lot of layering and looping in the music to
Right.
create the motifs to reflect like a circular theme.
Yeah.
And those soft hums that we hear all the way through, those are a piano, but he faded them up after the initial strike of the key, so we don't hear the beginning.
Yeah.
So he's like playing around with time a bit, like the
okay,
film
right.
does.
Yeah, like the reverb of the note. It's like the past or the future. It's like you don't hear the initial hammer.
Exactly.
It's the resonance of what happens in Left Behind. That's just genius.
I love that. Yeah, it's great.
And if you speak to anybody about the score, they're always going to bring up this theme, which again is quite relevant in other films. It has been used a lot, but the theme that plays at the start and the end of the film wasn't actually written by Johann Johansson. It's called On the Nature of Daylight, and it's a modern classical composer called Max Richter, who's one of my favourites. It's from a 2003 composition. It's in the album The Blue Notebooks. If you haven't heard that, that whole album is amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it being used so predominantly in the film meant that Johansson was ineligible for the nomination at the Oscars, unfortunately. But I mean, it does bookend the film beautifully.
Yeah, we played it at the start of this episode on the audio version. So that music, On the Nature of Daylight, its motif is like a run of notes, and then
Yeah.
we hear the same notes again, but reversed.
Yeah.
So it's palindromic, like parts of the narrative, like Hannah's name, which is
Yeah.
why they used it, and it's beautiful. So it fits in musically and thematically.
It's incredible. It's a beautiful 6 minutes of music. And it's in Shutter Island as well, if you think you've heard it somewhere else.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, no wonder Villeneuve let Johansson go off and do what he liked for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Absolutely awesome.
Yeah. It was used primarily as a temp track in a lot of things.
Right.
And a temp track's what you put in place to give to the editor so he gets the pace, and then that goes to the composer to replace that. And a lot of people just, especially Scorsese and Villeneuve, just went, I'm not replacing that.
How can you?
How can you? It's too good.
And the sound designer was Sylvain Bellemare, and he'd worked with Villeneuve on Incendies before this. And for the heptapods, he made their sound by combining bird singing, camels gurgling, and breathing through bagpipes and Maori instruments.
Got the bagpipes in there.
Get bagpipes in there straight away, like Braveheart.
Ian on the bagpipes.
Ian plays bagpipes while walking. The old camel gargle, I love that. Camels gargle, do they? I knew the spit, but like...
Didn't know the gargle, no. And then the sound of the ships moving, that's a combination of rolling rocks, wind, earthquakes, and ice breaking.
Right?
Yeah, the noise the ships make when they move sounds like cracking thunder almost.
It does, yeah. You could definitely hear the ice in that, yeah.
Yeah.
Johann Johansson wasn't nominated for an Oscar for his score for Arrival, as he wasn't eligible, like we just mentioned. Sylvain Bellemare, though, he was nominated for and won Best Sound Editing at the Oscars.
Nice.
And great work from both for us.
Yeah, superb
Unbelievable,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're moving on to the visuals now and some more first-time Villeneuve collaborators as we get into the cinematography and director of photography Bradford Young and the visual effects provided mainly by Rodeo FX and Oblique FX.
Yeah.
The cinematography then, Westy, how was Bradford Young's work here?
Bradford Young is absolutely fantastic here. A very naturalistic approach to his work, and he's not scared to say that. It's written all over everything he's done, from Selma. I first saw his work in Eight Them Body Saints. It's just the way that, and I'm going to sound really technical here and I'm boring. People who want to listen to it, fine. If you don't, I'll be over in a minute.
Go for it, I'll love it, Westy.
All the flash forwards are shot to 35mm, which gives it more or less what the eye sees. It's all handheld. It's all very loose. It gives the idea of home movies. It's very warm. And then the alien contact is on a 28mm, so it's slightly more wide. We can see more of the environment. It's all very static. It's all dolly shots. It's all steady cams. It's all very much like you know where you are in these two different worlds. And that's what he tried to explore with both of them things. And what I said about shooting wide open, it means he's shooting on fast lenses. I think these are like a 1.9, which means that your lens is wide open. So you're just focused on one thing. It's either the foreground or the background. You cannot do both. What they do here, Bradford Young's decision as well, and Villeneuve, was that we are not going to pull focus to an effect. The aircraft that are flying over, or the spaceship in the background, or anything, it's all very much on the foreground. It's all very much concentrated on Louise as a character. It follows the characters all the way through. And it's the integration of the CGI in this. It's Bradford Young's first time doing anything on this scale, first time doing anything with like a blue screen. But he said that one of his favourite shots, and one of my favourite shots as well, is when Louise is just going out and she's just trying to get a bit of fresh air and just separate herself from everything. And she's walking through that field.
Yeah.
A kind of sunset or a dusk, and the ship's just there, in the background, out of focus, because you would just think, well, we're going to pan around, she's going to be in the foreground, and then we're going to rack focus, and we're just going to put the ship in focus, and it's going to go, wah, it's going to be her thought process. Never does that. Feels very naturalistic. His lighting is very minimal. That he uses dark really well, he uses highlights really well. It's just a very accessible colour palette as well that he knows that he's doing. He's got the blues, and then you've got the warmth of the flash forwards. Bradford Young, for the want of a better word, absolutely fucking nails this to the wall. It's a wonderful, wonderful turn from him. And he took this job because he had a young family. He was the father.
Right.
And he wanted to explore that. It was like shooting his wife. You feel like you're watching somebody else's home movies and someone else's memories. And that's what I think Bradford Young does really well here. Absolutely nails it.
Absolutely. I mean, you said it, Westy. The cinematography is stunning.
Yeah.
Breathtaking at times. The composition of stuff's incredible. We talked about the first wide shot of the heptapod ship, and it is magnificent. The way he shoots the interiors of the ship, jaw-dropping, but he gets character as well. Like you say, Westy, how many close-ups are there of Louise? And every one of them is, like, incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, a close-up of Amy Adams is never going to look bad, to be fair, but Bradford Young just heightens it even further.
Yeah.
They're, like, photographic at times, those close-ups.
They are, and I think that's the shallow depth of field as well. It's either on an eyelash or it's on a bit of hair. The face falls off focus.
Yeah.
So we're just on an eye, and we're just really focused on the mindset of the character. It's really beautifully done.
And there's themes in the writing, in the music, and in the visuals as well. The opening shot, which pans to Louise's living room window, we see that kind of like graceful panning all the way through the film.
Yeah.
Fog and clouds are used a lot. The ships are always wrapped in fog. The heptapod's natural habitat seems to be in those cloud-filled chambers. And there's a circular theme. The logograms are circular. Louise's classroom is circular. She walks down a circular corridor in the hospital. Like, the lighting is incredible. The blocking is always brilliant. It looks stunning from the first frame to the last. It's just outstanding stuff for me.
Yeah.
We've waxed lyrical about quite a few aspects of the film, and the cinematography might, I think, be the best of the lot.
Yeah.
Wow. Having said all that, Villeneuve actually wanted to hire Roger Deakins as DP originally.
Get out, Young.
Get out, not you. Because they'd previously worked together on Prisoners and Sicario.
Yeah.
But Deakins was already scheduled to shoot Hail Caesar for the Coen brothers instead, so he just couldn't do it. And Villeneuve knew he wanted the film to have a strong sense of reality, and he described it as, this was happening on a bad Tuesday morning, like when you're a kid on the school bus on a rainy day. And he'd really liked what Bradford Young had done in dramas like Selma and Almost Fighting You, so he hired him instead.
Yeah, I think dirty sci-fi is how Young described the look they wanted to get.
Right.
And again, like a drama background, that was Bradford Young's background. And I think you can see that as well in that realism. And to say it works is an understatement. I think Villeneuve later called him a genius as well.
Yeah, I think that's just lit a fire under Bradford Young. It's like, we've got you because we couldn't get Dickens, and Young's went, right, well, fucking watch this.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Young later said that he was influenced by a Swedish photographer called Martina Hugland Ivanov, especially an exhibition in book she did called Speedway. That's a series of images of speedway riders racing at night, and Young said he was influenced by the lighting.
Yeah, if you've seen that, you can see it, I think. The, like, desaturated tones and the natural feel it has, it's there, kind of in Arrival.
Right.
Yeah.
Should have took the heptapods down the track. They'd have loved it.
And the whole film was shot digitally rather than on film.
Mm-hmm.
Young said they did that as they were often lighting in ways you wouldn't normally, so it meant they could see what they were getting instantly rather than having to wait for the negatives to come back.
Which makes sense, I think.
Yeah.
And he also said they would switch lenses a lot, like you're saying, Westy, sometimes within the same scene to create a sense of, like, imperfection because different lenses can have, like, different personalities, he said.
Yeah, he uses a lot of, like, old housed lenses. He's got his own company called Tribe 7, and they basically house old lenses into, like, new housing.
Right.
And he's obsessed with, like, older kind of vintage glass and flare and texture.
Cool.
And you can see that in a lot of his work, and I think different lens manufacturers would make a 35mm, which you'll see exactly the same frame, but the texture's going to be different, so they could change that up.
Again, it feels like you're watching an artist at work all the way
He's
through.
painting a picture, and you're just
Yeah.
watching every stroke of it, and it's genius, yeah.
It's good enough for Denis. It's good enough for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the effects in this because I think there's a wonderful scale to them. You know, we've just mentioned that amazing shot of Louise in the field where she's just taking some time to herself, and as we've said, that ship in the background is out of focus, and I love how, you know, that's like the USP of the film should be the ship, and it's just there, but that gives it a reality. It's become every day for these people. The shots where they approach it and you can only see the bottom of it, but it still takes up the whole of the top of the frame,
Yeah.
which just emphasises the size of it. But again, it's just a really interesting way of not going the kind of cliched money shot with them all the time.
Yeah, how many times would you see the ship in the foreground and it would half the frame,
Yeah.
and it would be coming down the ship, it would kind
Yeah.
of like crane down, and she would be
Yeah.
tiny in the background, out of
Yeah.
focus, walking towards it.
Yeah.
That would just be an obvious thing to do, and it just does not happen.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I love the effects in here, because the effects just become properly part of the story. And then one scene we've talked about, which is where the gravity shifts. In that scene, the hazmat suits were added to the actors digitally as they were strapped in the harness rigs at the time.
Right.
And that was done by Rodeo FX, and Oblique FX did most of the wide shots of the spaceships, which combined CGI with matte paintings.
Nice.
And they're all incredible, every one of them.
Yeah.
There probably is more digital effects in there than most of us realise, I think.
Definitely.
Obviously, the heptapods and the ships are done digitally, but there's a wide shot early on at Louise's home when she's leaving to join the mission. She's walking towards the helicopter and the house is behind her. You know the shot that I mean?
Yeah.
That was shot against blue screen and the house is all CGI.
Yeah.
And the establishing helicopter shot we get that like swirls around the camp. All the trucks and the tents, they were all done in CGI as well. But they use it really well.
Oh, yeah, they do.
That's how you do it. It's the Fincher method, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And like we mentioned earlier, originally the alien ships were spherical shaped and made of glass. During pre-production, though, Villeneuve came across an image of a real asteroid called 15 Eunomia in the asteroid belt. He showed it to one of the designers on the film called Aaron Morrison, and he developed into the design of the ships that we see in the film.
Yeah, they said there's a story about humans, so they wanted the spaceships to not be distracting or take away from that, so they made them quite subtle. They still look brilliant, though.
Oh, yeah,
really
yeah.
distinctive.
They look amazing. I think one of the best effects in the film is when they disappear and just turn into clouds.
Oh,
Fucking love that.
that's brilliant, yeah.
It's genius.
Well, talking about the heptapod ships, this is a fitting time for our second ATRM Patreon question.
All right.
This time it comes from Richard Hooley. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Richard.
Hello, Richard.
So Richard asks, in terms of creature design, ship design, and the way in which the aliens communicate, Arrival is incredibly original. Which other alien movies can you list that come close to this design originality? So what do you think, Matt?
I've gone for two here. One relatively modern, one a bit old school. More modern one, I've went for Under the Skin,
Oh, nice.
because you get to the end of that film and you still don't really know what the alien is supposed to look like.
You don't?
What the craft looks like, it's only suggested kind of at the beginning. There's the kind of light flaring in the sky, and then the whole dark pool thing Scarlett Johansson takes her victim to.
Yeah, really weird.
Really weird. A lot of eye imagery, a lot of iris imagery, but nothing concrete that says this is what the aliens look like and this is their ship. It's left so ambiguous, and it's one of the most striking takes on an alien I've ever seen, that one. And then classic old school, I would go for the 50s version of War of the Worlds. I love how they move away from the tripods, which H.G. Wells uses in the book, and it's that kind of boomerang shape that they've got with the eye on the stalk.
Yeah.
And I love like the kind of lasers just on the tips of the wings almost. They're not like cannons like you usually get with lasers, so I think that's such an evocative image, that one. That one's really well designed.
Yeah, I love the look of the heptapods, like I said, and some of that great alien designs. The Thing, of course, E.T., obviously.
Yeah.
The aliens from Attack the Block, I thought were quite original.
Yeah,
All black
yeah,
with like
yeah.
glowing white fangs.
Yeah, they're cool, yeah.
I thought the prawns in District 9 worked well.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking alien designs, nothing tops the alien, the xenomorph designed by H.R. Giger.
Yeah.
I mean, the facehugger as well, phenomenal design work. And in terms of spaceship designs, again, Arrival's in the conversation. I think the ships here look fantastic. The Nostromo, again from Aliens, brilliant. Discovery 1 from 2001's maybe the most influential. I'm a big fan of the Highliner ships from Dune.
Yeah.
Really minimalist, but look really good.
Yeah.
But spaceships-wise, I don't think you can look too far past Star Wars. I mean, the Millennium Falcon, X-Wings, TIE Fighters, Star Destroyers, all iconic, and that's just the first film. Crazy design work.
Answer this in the Westy style here. Like, have you got 3 films? I've got 1,600 ships.
And Westy, the best alien and spaceship design work for you?
I'm going to go for the earliest ones for me that really made an impact. And one of the first ones that I saw was the 1965 film Doctor Who and the Daleks with Peter Cushing.
Oh, yeah.
I loved that when I was a kid.
It's fantastic. Roy Castle in there.
Yeah, he is.
That's right.
It's just a wonderful film. It's just loads of fun. But I remember being absolutely terrified by the Dalek design, and I loved the colours of them and how they all had like a rank order. Then you find out that there's these things inside of it.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's just really fucking scary. And
The Daleks are fantastic,
the
aren't they?
Daleks are an incredible design for like an alien because you don't quite know what it is.
Yeah.
And they've got all these like different weapons and the voices are fantastic. Wow, if that's what aliens are like, I'm scared already. And then one that nobody really mentions, but one that stuck with me for a long time. This came out in 1985. It's a film called Enemy Mine.
Oh, yeah, with Lou Gossett.
Louis Gossett Jr. and Dennis Quaid.
I don't think I've seen it, no.
It's got Dennis Quaid in it, and basically Dennis Quaid's a starfighter and he's fighting against this alien race, and they both crash land on this planet and they've got to kind of like coexist and get along with each other and survive.
Yeah.
And it's like this reptilian design for Louis Gossett Jr. You would not know it's him.
Definitely not.
And for me, that's what I've always thought of like an alien would look like. It's incredible creature design. He's unrecognisable. Like the shape of his head's similar to like the xenomorph. It's got like a really original kind of tone to it, and his voice is amazing in it. He's got this really strange reptilian voice.
Yeah.
And I've always, from that, I think I was about 6 when I saw that, and that really stuck with me as like that's what aliens would be like, because they would be relatable and have like this reptilian vibe to them, almost like a dinosaur look to them, but with a heightened intelligence.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what I would say. Them two really stuck with me.
Reminds me of, remember V, the TV series where they've got green, they look great as well.
Yeah, and there's like humans and them working together in V. It's a similar kind of vibe. It's got that kind of energy to it, yeah. But the Predator as well. I mean, you've got to say that.
Of course.
Yeah, and the Predator ship, you only see it for a tiny bit at the start of the film, but that's fucking cool as ice pops. Yeah.
For his work on Arrival, Bradford Young became the first African-American to be nominated at the Oscars for Best Cinematography. No small achievement.
Wow.
The person who beat him that year was Linus Sandgren for La La Land.
Right.
Okay.
And the visual effects team weren't even nominated, which is surprising.
That's crazy.
The winners that year were MPC and Weta Digital for The Jungle Book, the remake. I think we seem to agree, though, pretty astonishing visuals throughout Arrival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the main crew, and Denis Villeneuve clearly had a very talented team at his disposal. We talked about production designer Patrice Vermette and costume designer Renee April earlier, and with Eric Heiser as screenwriter, Johan Johansson composer, Bradford Young DP, and the various visual effects studios. Quite the team worked on bringing Arrival to life.
A team. No one's getting a baseball bat to the back of the head this time.
The end.
The final act of Arrival, and everything starts to come together. The climax of the film, where Louise takes it upon herself to prevent World War III, will be discussed. Before that, though, we're talking the scenes where Louise starts to piece it all together.
Yeah, we are.
So, with China and Russia closing down comms and other nations following suit, Louise decides enough's enough. She heads aboard the heptapod vessel alone, and after a final chat with Costello, realises her visions aren't hallucinations, she's seeing the future.
Yeah.
It isn't a weapon, Westy. It's a gift.
It is a gift.
How do these scenes work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it starts to kind of wrap up and you're starting to get your head around it a little bit. On first watch, you still had no idea what was going on, to be perfectly honest. The clarity does come the more that you watch it, and it's more rewarding, I think, on rewatches.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
That's what they were aiming for, and I think it's especially what Villeneuve and Adams were aiming for, to give the audience the benefit of the doubt and not to drown things out. And she asks about who is this child? And where it's supposed to go, what are you talking about? Like, that's your... And yeah, she's confused. She's obviously in the atmosphere. That plays into it when you first watch it and just go, she doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't have any idea. There's no music at the start of this. It's all just incredible sound design that just kind of bubbles in the background. But what I get from this, and like, I don't know if you guys are going to agree with this theory or whether you don't, but I think her going into that ship and into that atmosphere herself affects her body in such a way that basically is what happens to Hannah. That contracts the disease. That's the radiation that's put inside her body.
Okay.
So by going up and solving the problem, she creates her own. Much like Abbott had to sacrifice himself knowing that he's going to die. Mm-hmm. Abbott's in the death cycle is what they say.
Yeah.
And so is Hannah at that point.
Wow.
Because it's irreversible. She's unstoppable. Yeah. And it's all circular. And maybe the point of this film is we're watching this, and that's the start of the disease within her body that she passes on to Hannah. So there's things that she does that she faces consequences within this film of why Hannah would contract that disease. Circular, it all comes round in one.
Yeah.
And that's what I get from this. And like the third or fourth time I watched it, I thought, she's coughing, she's physically moved by this atmosphere, she's physically uncomfortable, and she receives the gift here. And the gift, as we've mentioned in the whole film, is a weapon. And the weapon, unfortunately, is inside her body and is used against her unborn child. So I get all of that from this one sequence, and that just makes the film even more intelligent for me because it's not laid down thick. And I think if you interpret the film from that point of view, it just makes it far, far more interesting and gives this whole sequence far more depth and emotion. That I really like that. I like to buy into that theory because I think that's she needs to sacrifice something to save everything else.
Yeah, it's an interesting take, Westy. You could be onto something, I think.
Yeah. For once.
Yeah, as always. Brave as a lion, Louise, isn't she? Going aboard the ship by herself. And Halpin's like, what the hell is she doing? Piss off. She's saving your ass, that's what she's doing.
Yeah.
I like the final conversation between Louise and Costello where everything gets revealed. They're having a right old chinwag now. Can't shut him up, Costello.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
There are some interesting things come out, though. Like you say, Westy, Louise says, who is this child, about Hannah to spell it out to us that these aren't flashbacks.
Yeah.
And then we see Hannah's made a heptapod out of plasticine.
Yeah.
Great visual way of letting us know that's actually the future. Also, I find that the heptapods must have a pretty long lifespan. Costello says we need humanity's help in 3,000 years. And as far as we know, Louise can only see in the future as far as she's alive.
Yeah.
So Costello must live for over 3,000 years in that case.
What on earth we can help them with in 3,000 years, I've no idea.
We won't be here in 3,000 years.
Look at the state of us nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, it's circular, so it could happen now. They might just want to know how to make a pizza or something.
I can help them with that.
Help with that, I like the wheel, or anything circular that we've invented, basically.
Either way, looks in good nick, Costello, doesn't he? 3,000 years old.
He looks really good. What's a sandwich?
But it's a really good way to reveal everything. Final conversation between Costello and Louise, where the language and the actual physical barriers no longer exist between them.
Yeah.
But has there been a sadder line anyway than Costello saying, Abbott is death process?
Yeah, death process, yeah.
Can't say that.
So is Hannah, though. I think that's the sacrifice that everybody's made. So is she is in death process. It is a process. It's always a process, and it's always happening to everybody, but don't quite know.
And then from here, you get the next flash forward, which is where it feels like the film's starting to twist the knife a bit here, with this sense that something bigger is slowly being revealed here. There's this feeling that pieces are slowly being moved into shape, but you're just not quite sure what they are, because Louise has commented to Hannah about her dad leaving, that it's her fault. I told him something he wasn't ready to hear, and he said I made the wrong choice, which, spoiler alert, I'll come back to this. He's 100% correct.
Oh,
well, just wait till we get there. This is one of Adam's strongest scenes, I think, on repeat viewings, knowing what she's struggling with in that scene by the lake. And I really like how it transitions from that shot of her hugging Hannah to her collapsing in Ian's arms. And it's a scene that's got that lovely ironic twist when she says, I remember now why my husband left me. In his response, I didn't know you were married.
yeah, it's brilliant.
That's great. So, yeah, a lot going on in this scene on repeat viewings.
Yeah, I miss my husband as well, she says, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty heartbreaking listening to Louise tell Hannah what's going to happen without being too explicit, obviously. But the way we're cutting between Louise and Hannah by the lake and the shots of the helicopters around the world taking up like strategic positions against the heptapod ships, that's really well put together. Every wide shot of the ships we see is stunning. Only now they've all got guns trained on them. Which, do you also think that might be how it might actually play out if this were to happen?
Oh, perhaps. Yeah, depressingly, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So, a fairly depressing thought, but luckily, Louise isn't done just yet.
No.
The climactic act of arrival ties everything up. First, Louise reveals the twist to Weber and us before China's military head General Shang, played by Zi Ma, comes into effect. Using her newfound prescience, Louise gets Shang's number, tells him his wife's dying words, and saves everyone's skin. All while Halpin's threatening to shoot her. Good guy. How does it all come together for you, Matt?
I mean, there's a lot going on. The revelations are coming thick and fast, but I really love the fact that Louise learning heptapod. To me, that's a really great, well, what came first, the chicken or the egg scenario? Does she suddenly learn heptapod language there and then and it just clicks? Or is it because she sees herself in the future writing a book about it, teaching it, so she realises, oh, I've known this all along, actually.
Yeah.
Like the ambiguity of that. I mean, don't think about it too much because I think your head is only going to end up hurting. I tried to figure it out the other day and I just couldn't get there.
I've been there as well. It's a nightmare.
It is. It's a nightmare.
I ended up just thinking, the front cover of the book, that's just like a yin-yang. That's fine, I'll just leave it there.
And it's the same with the sudden revelation that they don't see time in a linear fashion. Again, that's quite a big leap to get to that point, but by this point, I'm fully on board with anything Louise says. You know, she's completely more intelligent than I'll ever be, so that's fine. Adams completely sells it.
Yeah.
But I love how when she's talking to Rebel, I love his really understanded reaction. So we can learn heptapod if we survive. Like, that's just his base level of thinking about this. Yeah, there's bigger things going on for him. You understand what his focus is. And I do like, again, he's not a completely cliched character. There is that sense at the end when he says goodbye to Louise and Ian, he does genuinely respect them for what they've done, and he does appreciate they've tried their best, but it's just events that are bigger than all of them here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the key kind of statement the heptapods give is, there is no time, use weapon. By which they mean, time's not as you think it is. Use the tool we've given you and you'll see what we mean.
Yeah.
Louise understands that, but the military translate it like Independence Day. Like, time's up. We're going to blow you away.
Yeah.
Too many Roland Emmerich films for helping.
Yeah.
But also I do quite enjoy the moment that Louise does confirm, for our benefit mainly, exactly what's going on. She says to Webber, the weapon's their language. If you really learn it, you start to perceive time like they do. This, like, mind-blowing revelation. And Webber couldn't give a monkeys. He's just like, whatever. See you later.
Get on the helicopter.
But the way it all ties in and gets revealed at the end, it feels important, like the end of good films usually do.
Yeah, I mean, it's all turned on its head, and we find out from this flash-forward moment, it is a flash-forward, isn't it right? Yeah, it is. That Shang has something that he has to say to Louise, and actually is part of the audience as well. Now, this scene really has to hit. This scene really has to work, otherwise everything falls apart.
Yeah.
I don't know how your mind works, but I know you need to hear this. And it's just the set design here. It's circular in the background.
Yeah.
It's the warmth of the tungsten lights that's just leaning towards the flash forward. But kind of understand where this is going now.
Her earrings are round as well, if you know.
Yeah, I was just about to say the jewellery's all circular.
Yeah.
Everything's got a motif here, and it really works. All the flags in the background are all the countries that have been on the screens. Everything kind of marries together. It's Zimar here that really sells it. The way that he shows on the number, whispers in her ear. I think it's really important that we don't know what was said. There wasn't subtitles on the screen, so we don't know what the wife's last words were as she was dying. But the more I think about it and go, from a writing point of view, does that sell the end of the film? If someone rang you up out of the blue and just said, this is your wife's dying words, by the way, I think it would work. No matter who you are, you would stop what you're doing and go, hold on a second, there's something else here.
I buy it in the film. I
totally buy it.
Okay.
It needs to land, and it does. And again, she's on the phone. I like the fact that it's, the guy who's been causing the problems all the way through. It's his phone. He's left stuff lying around.
Yeah. Whose phone's that? It's yours.
It's yours. Yeah, I love that. And he said, well, go and find it. Great. And this is the most Ian does in the whole film. And this sums up his character, though, isn't it? By his 20 seconds. And all he has to do is put himself between the gun, just puts himself up and sacrifices himself for the greater good. That's all he can do. This whole final sequence needs to land. You need to buy it. It needs to work. And it does all of them things.
It absolutely does. Yeah, General Shang. Not to be confused with General Chang.
No.
The warmongering Klingon played by Christopher Plummer in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country.
Oh, God forbid we get those two confused.
I wouldn't worry about that for me.
No. Love to see him in there quoting Shakespeare at the heptapods. And I like that whole sequence of Louise telling Shang his wife's dying words. None of that's in the book. Shang isn't in the book at all. So Eric Heiser had to come up with a satisfying way to end things that works in the movie, and I think he does.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a general criticism the film gets around this time of China being presented as the bad guys. I get it, and I don't disagree with it, but I can get away with it because I don't think the US are presented as the good guys. I mean, Louise is, but the military are kind of personified by Halpin.
Yeah,
he is like General Chang.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, and I think, again, it's about communication and language. If the Western world's moving faster and if America's got the answers, it's going to be harder to translate that over.
Yeah. definitely.
Yeah.
I do feel like the climactic scenes sag a little bit for me, not quite as streamlined as the rest of the film.
Yeah, same.
But after it's all sorted and we get the final wide shots of the alien ships all leaving, they disappear in that like bale of cloud and smoke.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I love that.
Hang them on your wall.
Every time I look at clouds now, I think, are they just going to come down again? Hope they do.
Yeah, so we've mentioned Shang whispers his wife's final words into Louise's ear, and we don't hear what they are. As Westy said, there's no subtitles, so Heisler had never actually wrote what the words were, but Villeneuve said to him, they're the most important words in the film, you have to come up with something. Heisler did, and Villeneuve wanted to keep it a secret, but Heisler just blabbed a couple of years later. So,
I mean, it's great this. Check out what I've written.
Yeah. So what Louise says to Shang is, in war, there were no winners, only widows.
Yep, that works.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it's a good line. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's got to be satisfying what she says, and it is. I bet Villeneuve was furious, though, wanted to take it to his grave, by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
From there, we're into the final moment of the film, back at the start, where Louise and Ian are about to conceive Hannah. The denouement.
Oh, it was all going so well. This is the moment where the film comes off the tracks for me, because
Wow.
Oh, okay.
I just cannot wrap my head around Louise's decision here at all.
To sleep with Ian.
Well, no, yeah, come on. He's definitely punching.
Well, that's true.
No, to embark on a relationship that she knows will end in condemning a child to a horrible, painful, lingering death, which will destroy Ian's life in the process, particularly because she doesn't even give him a say in this decision. I just think it completely undoes her character. It makes her really selfish, and
Wow.
I've had this discussion with other people because it is divisive. I've seen this discussion online. And we've mentioned the idea of predetermination, but I just don't think that works here, because she has the premonition about Cheng and his wife's dying words, but she still decides to make that call. She doesn't just go, oh, well, that must happen then. She could have decided not to make that call. She decides to go through this with Ian and with Hannah.
Yeah.
And I just cannot comprehend why you would make that decision. It destroys so much goodwill I've got about the character. It really infuriates me.
Wow.
I mean, I can see where Matt's coming from, but at the same time, it's the message, isn't it? It's like, you never know what's going to happen with anything. And if you did know what was going to happen, would you still want the joy that you had? Would you still want them to experience the life? Is it worth just living for a couple of years to experience that? We aren't ones to play God. I don't know. I've come to peace with that in certain ways and not read it as straight down the line as you have, Matt. I think if you look at it, step back from it a little bit, there might be something to get from it, but we'll get there.
Yeah, 'cause it's not just about Louise and Ian, is it? Especially to Louise, because to Louise, Hannah isn't something in the future. She remembers her. She's a real person in her head. I guess from her point of view, it is kind of like, how can I deny her the right to live? That's part of it as well, I think.
I think that the last 5 minutes, this could be a Patreon episode all on its own. Could be like 50 minutes just on the last 5 minutes and Louise's decision. But I just cannot agree with it at all, and it just ends on such a sour note for me.
Either way, I think the denouement's brilliant.
Fuck you, Matt.
I mean, Villeneuve basically plays the opening again in terms of the shot of Louise's huge window, but then plays the whole thing out. And now, with what we now know, all of it makes sense. It is the night Hannah was conceived. I can't believe they didn't name her Abbott. That's outrageous. But stunning storytelling for me. What I love most, though, is definitely Ian's line to Louise. I've had my head tilted up at the stars most of my life. You know what surprised me the most? It wasn't meeting them. It was meeting you.
Yeah.
Ah, here he is. I've been waiting for this guy to turn up. What a line that is.
It's unbelievable, man.
That's like, I came across time for you, sir, from the Terminator. Ian might not know heptapod, but he does know the language you love. How can you turn that down?
Yeah, definitely.
And I like it when Louise's book gets delivered at the end, the universal language about learning heptapod, mainly because it reminds me of George McFly getting a match made in space at the end of...
Back to the Future, yeah.
And then we end with the title logo coming on the screen, which looks great. And it's the same we saw at the start, which signifies this kind of circular narrative the film has. Just a great way to end things.
Yeah. I mean, to take the sting out of the tail for Matt, I know it's, if you look at it from that point of view, but the whole film has been telling you that if you learn a different language, then it rewires your brain to think completely differently.
Yeah.
So if she chooses to have Hannah anyway, she has her in a circular narrative, she has her in a circular time, she never ever dies, there's no start, there's no end, she's always going to be with her.
Yeah.
She can visit her any time that she wants to. She visited Shang when she wanted to, she can visit Hannah when she wants to. Hannah's always going to be alive to her. Ian cannot speak the language and he won't be able to have that, which is why he left. That's what I get from it anyway. And I see that as a selfish thing. There's no beginning and there's no end. It's circular. So Hannah doesn't necessarily die, and that's why she chooses to do it, because in this timeline, now that she can speak heptapod, she doesn't lose Hannah. She's always there with her. She can see her whenever she wants to.
In other words, Ian's been screwed right over, hasn't he?
Just learn the language. Read the book.
Genuinely, I think that's my issue. Is I used to have described it better than the film does, because I just take it as, yeah, screw Ian's feelings. He doesn't get a say in this.
Yeah.
It would take just twisting one line of dialogue to say, and I told your father, and we both decided it would be worth it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a better story, isn't it? The way they do it.
It is, because it's not a decision that's just made linearly. In the argument when they first meet, it's a discussion between language and science, and he chooses science, and that makes her selfish. She chooses language, and she understands. If he swallowed his science and swallowed his pride and learned the language the same way that she did, he could experience Hannah circularly and not in a linear fashion, and therefore always be with her.
Learn the language, Ian.
There you go.
But then Hannah still dies horribly. You've still got a dead child.
In a linear timeline.
Yeah, which is Hannah's timeline.
Yeah, but who doesn't die horribly, Matt?
Who truly lives?
Who truly lives and who doesn't die horribly? Do you know what I mean? It is a choice that you make. When you have children, it is a gamble that you'd make. It is a choice.
Oh, of course, yeah.
When you're alive, it's a choice that you make every day to walk out the front door, turn left, turn right, cross the street. It's like, well, if you knew what was going to happen, would you choose love over pain? And she chose love over pain because she could have that love whenever she wanted it until her death. And if we all lived circularly and didn't think about the ending, would appreciate where we are now, appreciate where you are in your timeline, and don't worry about what's coming at the end because it's all circular anyway.
Again, you've just explained it better than the film manages to do, which is the problem for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched it like 19 times.
Yeah. I mean, I think the film that does this kind of ending in a much more thought-provoking way, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah, it's a very similar vibe, yeah.
Is that completely predetermined that Joel and Clementine were always destined to be together?
Yeah, it does.
This, to me, dismisses them all completely and puts a real shadow on Louise's character.
Yeah, I think this is just a lot more subtle and a lot more find your own answers if you really want to, and I think that's what Villeneuve was trying to do with it.
Yeah.
It's a shame she won't live, but in the end, who does?
Exactly. In the flash forwards towards the end of the film, Ian calls Hannah Star Stuff. This is a reference to Cosmos, the famous documentary about space by Carl Sagan, where Sagan says the nitrogen in our DNA and the calcium in our teeth were made in the interiors of collapsing stars. We are made of star stuff.
He's got all the lines now, Ian, hasn't he?
Of course he has. What do you mean by that, Dad? Doesn't matter. Go and clean your teeth.
Worked on you, Mum. That's all you need to know.
Yeah. That's not in the book either, so another nice addition from Heisera.
Yeah, that's really nice. I love that. I'm going to start using that.
In Heisera's original script, doesn't actually end with a heptapods language being their gift. But what they do is they give humans the technology to create interstellar travel instead. But around the time the script was being finalised, Christopher Nolan made, obviously, Interstellar, and they thought it was just too similar, so they changed it to what we see in the film.
Right.
Yeah, originally the different nations were given different gifts. The US got faster than light travel, like you say.
Right.
China were given like a really advanced life support machine.
Okay.
Right.
Surely it has to be the language though, doesn't it? That's what the whole film's been about.
Yeah, thematically it sticks, yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, it's roll credits and Arrival is done. All stories wrapped up, including Louise's personal narrative with the heptapods and humanity's wider one, and a nice twist. Mm-hmm. A satisfying way to finish for me and Westy.
It's a satisfying way to finish for anyone if you watch a film 20 times.
Reception and awards.
And that is the story of the life of Arrival. Almost. The film was widely released on November the 11th, 2016. How did it do? Well, our own theoretical physicist, Matt, is here to tell us.
Yeah.
So, go for it, Matt.
Bold claim, that. So, Arrival, it was made for a production budget of $47 million, and it grossed $100.5 million domestically and $203.4 million worldwide. So, obviously, a very, very decent return for a highbrow sci-fi film.
Yeah, definitely. Marketing would have been into that 30 or so million, I'd guess, so
Yeah.
tidy profit. Mm-hmm. Critics-wise, it fared pretty well too. Roger Ebert was no longer with us by 2016. He completed the death process, very sadly.
Yeah.
But his memory lives on in his still popular website, so what did Brian Tallarico of RogerEbert.com give Arrival out of 4?
Ooh. I mean, I don't know who Tallarico is or what his taste is.
Yeah, neither do
Which
I.
is the problem. I'll say 4 because it was loved when it came out.
3.5.
it was 3 stars out of 4.
Ah, okay.
Right.
And he said, Arrival is more about grief, time, communication and compassion than it is warp speed, and it's a film that asks questions. Why is it important to communicate through language and not action? A movie that gets too sterile at times, but Adams is always there to ground it in one of the most subtle sci-fi movie performances I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Agree with Bri?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
It is a sort of performance from Amy Adams, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The Guardian rated Arrival the third best film of 2016, and Mark Kermode gave the film 4 stars out of 5, saying, Arrival is a class act from its cool minimalist opening to its poignant mind-bending finale. It's a zen sci-fi thriller that's more about mood and mind than time and space. It is a touch of class, isn't it?
It is. It's a very classy film.
Villeneuve, Adams, Bradford Young, Johan Johansson, class act.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just hasn't aged at all if you watch it now.
Probably more relevant this year, considering the message of just
Absolutely,
let's just
yeah.
communicate a bit better about stuff, eh?
It's getting more relevant every fucking
is,
year,
sadly,
to be honest.
yeah.
And Empire Magazine gave the film the full whack of 5 stars out of 5 and said, Arrival is a beautifully polished puzzle box, and like all the best sci-fi, it has something to say about today's world, particularly the importance of communication and how we need to transcend cultural divides and misconceptions if we're to survive as a species.
Oh, yeah.
Wise word from Empire there.
Yep.
Dan Jolan, that was.
Right.
Nice.
And then today on Rotten Tomatoes, Arrival has an 82% audience approval rating and a big old 94% from critics.
Wow.
Then on IMDb, it is 7.9 out of 10. And then at the Oscars, nominated for 8 awards in total, as we've said, winning only one, which was Best Sound Editing for Sylvain Bellemare.
A critic's darling, not quite so much with audiences. Is that fairly typical for Villeneuve, do you think?
I think so.
I think so, yeah, most of the time.
Something as weighty as this, I think, was going to tick more boxes for the critics, wasn't it, than your Saturday night crowd.
I don't think he ever goes for ticket sales. He's just not interested in that. He's interested in leaving behind a legacy and being incredibly
Of course.
honest towards that, I think, and honest towards his craft.
So Arrival did well in its release, especially for a highbrow cerebral science fiction film. Big returns at the box office, some award success, and still highly thought of today. Has it been tread fairly, do you think?
I think so.
I think so, yeah, overall, yeah.
Yeah, highly thought of.
Sequels and influence.
There was never talk of a sequel to Arrival. Unsurprisingly, Villeneuve never had any intention of making one. I guess there are some places it could have went. We don't really see the societal effects of the heptapods' arrival on Earth.
Yeah.
Or Arrival 2, 3,000 years later, to see why they need our help. Would you like a sequel?
Yeah, in 3,000 years' time when I'm not here to see it.
You'll be here, Westy.
Oh, of course I will. Yeah.
It's all non-linear, remember?
It's non-linear, I'll still be around. I'll be in that life support thing that the Chinese have got.
Like in the Big Lebowski.
Yeah, like the iron lung. Just talking shit and getting fed chow mein.
How about the impact the film's had, though? What is the influence and legacy of Arrival, do we think?
I think its legacy is that this was Villeneuve's real breakthrough to the mainstream. As mainstream as this film can get, to be honest. If he hadn't done this, or if this film had flopped, would he have been given any opportunity to adapt Dune, especially in the way he wants to do it? I wouldn't have thought so at all. And then I think it just also stands out as one of Amy Adams' finest performances. I mean, she's got a lot to choose from. She's that good, but this is absolutely up there with the very best she's ever done. So I think those two in particular got the most out of this film, and I think that's where its legacy lies.
Yeah, for a film that didn't make huge waves on its release necessarily, I do think Arrival's had a sizable impact. The influence on Villeneuve's career, like you say, Matt, is obvious. But also the way it goes about it. This is artistic, highbrow science fiction. It explores an event which has every chance of happening at some point in extraterrestrial first contact, possibly in our lifetimes, who knows. And it does it with intelligence. I do wonder if this film would have been made if not for the influence of Christopher Nolan this century. I suspect not. But cerebral science fiction is still a niche which is nowhere near full enough for me. I get why, because science fiction by its nature always costs money because you usually need special effects. But Arrival proves if you do it well, with a talented filmmaker and talented cast and crew, you can make something which has artistic merit and which makes money. Hopefully we'll see a lot more of it from Villeneuve and others, and hopefully that becomes its legacy. I'm not holding my breath, but I hope it does.
No.
Yeah, I think this is just going to keep finding a new audience. Like we've said, this is even more relevant now than it was when it came out, because it has this timeless message of humanity and it boils it down to what is it to be human and what is it to be important and what is time, and all of them things are in themselves timeless. It's the message more than the spectacle, and I think that's always going to land with people, and it's always going to be relevant, and it's always going to find an audience with every new generation. I think that's what Villeneuve's done with his whole career. He's just waiting, and the audience is going to find his work. He's doing what's honest to him, and that's where it's going to lie. So I think that's its legacy. In its influence, I mean, there was a fair few science fiction films that came off the back of it, but nothing that really kind of came close apart from the likes of High Life.
Yeah.
You know, that came a couple of years afterwards,
Yeah.
which was a pretty good film. But again, you could see this was written all over that.
Yeah.
And again, you know, they're trying to take the message over the spectacle and trying to do something that has a real visual kind of punch to it. And I think that's what Villeneuve done, is like, you know, you don't need a lot. It goes hand in hand with Nolan's work for me.
Well, we've got our third and final ATRM Patreon question now, and I think the legacy of the film is as good a place for it as any.
Yeah.
It comes from George Anderson. Hello, George.
Hello, George.
Hello, George.
Now, George has been one of our patrons for as long as Costello's been alive, so he knows a thing or two.
Yeah, 3,000 years.
And he is asking, does ATRM believe aliens exist? And if so, have any films come close to depicting how each of you imagine they would appear to humans?
Right.
The big question, Matt. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
What's your purpose with this one, Matt?
Oh, God, what's my purpose in anything?
So you took a dark turn there.
Have we switched roles in this pod?
I find it hard to imagine that in the whole universe out there, there's not some kind of life existing and thriving somewhere. Is it intelligent life?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a big reach. I'm not intelligent enough to try and work that out. But do I think they've been visiting Earth in spaceships? No, not really. I just think there'd be some kind of concrete proof one way or the other. But for the sake of the question, let's say I did. In terms of their depiction, it's a tricky one because I think that's just been entirely informed by movies and TV anyway. You know, little green men, grey aliens with big black eyes from the X-Files. Like, anything I can think of.
I've got them, yeah.
It's only because of popular culture anyway. I kind of haven't got this idea in my head, and the film has come along and go, wow, already kind of implanted in my head from what I've seen. So, you know, they would have to have arms and limbs and opposable thumbs because that's how you make things, that's how you build things. So if I had to pick one film, though, to answer George's question, I would say it is probably Close Encounters to me. If they landed tomorrow, that's what I think they would look like.
Right.
Classic.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this all night, to be honest. I have, on occasion.
Yeah, I know. You have. We've heard it all before.
I know this time, though, don't worry.
Yeah.
I was going to start talking about the Drake equation and the Fermi paradox and start putting everyone to sleep.
Oh, you're not going to?
Oh, man.
I mean, the short answer is that we don't know if aliens exist. Obviously, I know, but we can't even guess because we don't know enough about the universe. We don't know if we're like a miraculous freak of nature on Earth.
Yeah.
SETI are out there with their huge telescopes looking for signals and have been for decades. But apparently, if the observable universe is the size of every ocean on Earth, the amount of space SETI have searched is like a bathtub. So next to nothing.
Wow.
The answer, essentially, is either the universe is teeming with life or we are all alone. As for George's second question, which film depicts aliens best? The film about first contact I think is most interesting is Contact by Robert Zemeckis, if you've seen that.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in Arrival as well, I think. There's a lot of
I
elements.
think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. It's based on a novel by Carl Sagan, who we mentioned.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, Jodie Foster's character meets aliens and they appear as her dead father on a beach because they say that's the only way we can really conceive of what they are.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We've been around as humans for 300,000 years, about. The universe is 13.7 billion years old. So, like, imagine showing a human from, like, the 1800s an iPhone.
Yeah.
They don't know what a phone is, don't know what a TV is, or what a computer is. They literally wouldn't be able to conceive of what we were showing them.
Yeah.
And that's 200 years. An alien species could be 13 billion years ahead of us. So what could that look like? God knows. So from that point of view, Contact's interesting in that it could be something we can't even conceive of. But either way, one of my favourite ever quotes is from Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote 2001 with Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
And he said, 2 possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both possibilities are equally terrifying.
Yeah.
That I agree with.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. You mentioned Contact there. That mirror shot at the start of Contact's
Oh,
absolutely
one of the
unprecedented.
best.
It's a beauty,
Fucking
that, isn't it?
brilliant.
Go on then, Westy.
Of course they exist, man. Fucking everywhere. I'd love to think that they do, because I love stuff like this, and I would love to have that level of excitement. It's like, do you believe in ghosts? No, but I'd love to. You must have seen something by now. It's always just interesting. It's Area 51 and they're under the ground and they've landed before and they're keeping them a secret. And that's just exciting, isn't it? And that's, again, probably so childish to any kind of race that comes to this world and just goes, they think that we're like the hiding us. Oh, God, let's just leave this place alone.
I know, yeah.
There's a really good cartoon where they just say Jesus on the cross, and it's like he died for our sins. People are worshipping, and they're just like, let's get the fuck out of here. It's just, this is what they do to their own people.
Yeah.
It's like maybe if they're observing it and they're seeing how batshit we are and they just want no part of it whatsoever, maybe that's an element of it, because I don't even want to be here. But for me, and keeping that kind of fantasy alive, the one that really tapped in with me was They Live.
Oh, yeah.
Put the shades on, and they're already here, but they're so clever that they can just manipulate how we think, what we do, and we are under control. Maybe they are here and we don't know about it, and I love that concept that maybe they are here and they always have been. The X-Files was a massive influence. Signs, I think, was really terrifying.
Signs
Of like,
is good,
if they landed, would it be that kind of vibe to it? And Mac and Me, obviously.
Well, obviously. That's kind of what David Icke says, Westy, if you want to get into his theories.
I'm into his theories. Well, I'm not into his theories. I'm aware of them. Lizard people and all that shit.
Yeah,
but if it does happen, terrifying. Like you said, John, if it doesn't, terrifying. But, if it's all circular, at least that's a little bit of a hug.
No sequels to Arrival then, and surely there won't ever be, for the best, most likely.
Yes, thank God.
But in being Denis Villeneuve's first foray into science fiction and progressing his career and improving there is a market for thoughtful science fiction, it does have significance. And aliens, who the hell knows?
We might find out.
If you're picking up this transmission somewhere, sign up to Patreon.
All the Right Movies ranking.
And we have arrived at the end, or the beginning.
Hello and welcome to All the Right Movies.
I'm not really sure anymore, but either way, this is the moment we each give Arrival our final scores out of 10.
Yeah.
So, Westy, to start us off, your summary and score for Arrival, please.
I mean, I do find this one quite hard to rank, like I said, at the start and the end. But, I mean, ultimately, I'm not going to really wax lyrical about it. There is bits where it does get a bit bumpy and it drops us out. Namely, the explosion, namely, them bits coming into it. It kind of loses traction. It gets a little bit thin and it comes back at the end and you have to really buy it. And that's fantastic and it works for me. But you can't lose the audience at that point. It's not as strong consistently all the way through. I will say that. But it does inspire me, especially to live my life to the best that I can, no matter what may happen. It shows us the moment, and that moment will come no matter how hard you fight it. It is going to happen. So just live the best you can until you can't. And that's what I get from this, and I walk away from it, and I like that feeling. And I think the joy you feel when you're alive is far more important than the loss you feel when it's gone. And you've just really got to embrace that and enjoy all of the little things and enjoy all of the love that's around at the minute, because when it's gone, it is gone. So you have to stop for a second, and this film makes me stop. And for that, I really appreciate it. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be interesting for people to dive into this and pull something from it. And I think for a film to have that kind of message and to not be cliched and cheesy is really, really important. And for something to stop people in the tracks and make them appreciate that they're alive is incredibly important to do as well. From a film point of view, yeah, it does dip a bit in the narrative, so I can't give it full marks, but I am going to give it a very, very solid, a very, very happy 9 out of 10.
Very nice. Well, like I said at the start, I was very excited by the prospect of this film when I first heard it was in development. Great source material and directed by a filmmaker who proved in Prisoners and Sicario that he looks for the truth in his films. But I've been there before. We all have, as film fans, many times, and been disappointed.
Yeah.
Not so with Arrival. I loved it when I first saw it, and on rewatches, it has got better, if anything.
Yeah.
It's got just about everything I want in a science fiction film. It's original in that it visits a classic subgenre, Alien First Contact, but does it with a fresh angle. It's highly intelligent in that it explores themes around language, around communication, around perception, and more. It's touching and delivers genuine warmth and heartfelt moments, mainly through Amy Adams, who is fantastic in the lead. And it's artistic. The filmmaking craft is sensational at times. The cinematography from Bradford Young is non-stop stunning. The music from Johan Johansson and Max Richter, near perfection. And the writing from Eric Heisserer, I think, is up there among the greatest adaptations I've seen. And obviously, above all that, is Denis Villeneuve, one of the great science fiction filmmakers out there for me, and this is my favourite of his. Throwing a chat line from Ian that still wouldn't have been topped in 3,000 years.
Yeah.
And you've got one of my favourite films of the century.
Right.
Not quite full marks, as I do think the ending isn't as tight as I'd like, but it's not far off. 9.5 for me.
Nice.
And Matt, to take us to the end or the start. Take your pick. Your summary and score for Arrival, please.
I'll do them all. It is frustrating for me, this film, because so much of it is brilliant. The central idea, I love it. The look of it, the sound of it, the performances, particularly from Amy Adams. Add all that up, and the first 2/3 of this film are sailing their way towards being a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And the film absolutely takes a big swing, but it just doesn't quite connect at the end to hit that home run that I really wanted to. There are some moments that the narrative needs, but how they've been put on screen feel a bit contrived. We've talked about the explosion. And I just think the ending needs a little bit more clarity as to what's going on, not to be as ambiguous as it is. But I will just stick to my guns in that the decision that Louise makes at the end, I can't get on board with. It leaves me feeling very deflated. And again, I'll just say it again, I think we've discussed it in a better way than the film manages to put it on screen, which is a shame.
If we do say so ourselves.
If we do say so, why not pat ourselves on the back?
We've had a lot more time. If they did that, it would be a 2-hour ending.
It's maddening because so much of the film in bits deserves a better score, but taking it all together, it balances out at an 8 for me.
Right. Okay.
So we also put this out there to our formerly Twitter followers to get their thoughts on Arrival.
Okay.
So Janine Curran at Janine Returns said, as a language nerd, I love that Arrival highlighted one of the most overlooked and interesting aspects of First Contact. How do two different species communicate?
Nice.
And as a mother, the deeper message of this movie is perhaps the most beautiful in all of cinema. Yeah, I mean, that blend of science and art is something we've been talking about and something I think Arrival does do well.
Yeah.
Hugh Parker at HughP1970 said, I hadn't watched this movie until a month ago and was blown away by Adam's performance. Hadn't quite figured out the time-fractured narrative by the end of it, but was aware there was something there. Watched it again the next night and it all fell into place. Brilliant movie.
Great.
Yeah. Wonder if you're still watching it every night? That's his life now, just Arrival every night.
Why not? Yeah.
And one of our patrons, Thomas Boyd, said, love the film and its concept. The idea that language is the key to how we perceive the universe is fantastic and well executed. If I had to remove points, I would only do so because the filming feels a bit too dark to me. Sorry, Westy. So, 9.5.
All right, fine. Don't be sorry, be better.
Not dark enough for you, I imagine, Westy.
It's smiling bright. See all the faces and everything.
So mostly positive from our followers and patrons, and altogether they rated the film as, what do you think out of 10?
I'd say a 9.
I'll go 9.5.
It was 8.5.
8.5.
Really?
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So in total, that gives Arrival 35 out of 40.
Okay.
Right.
A good score for cerebral science fiction.
Yes.
Very good score.
And that's that on Arrival. Hopefully you think we did better than the last guy. Or that you understood us, at least. Next time out, Luke, Westy and Matt have got a 2-day head start. They've got friends in every village from here to the Sudan, speak a dozen languages, know every local custom, they'll blend in, disappear, you'll never see them again. With any luck, they've got the Grail already. Imagine if after that, not The Last Crusade. But no, our followers chose wisely.
They did.
Next time it is Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does anybody here speak English?
Or even Ancient Greek.
Ancient Greek.
I'm already excited for that one. You are obviously, Westy.
Oh, I'm over the fucking moon. I can't wait for that one. Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, to find out more about becoming a patron, supporting what we do, and accessing our archive and bonus episodes, please visit patreon.com/alltherightmovies, or you can subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts too. Also, please follow us on the podcast platform of your choice, and if you could leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, that really helps us out.
Yes, it really does. And Spotify as well.
And Spotify allows comments too, so get stuck in. We will answer them.
Yeah, we're around. We've got nothing else to do.
Yeah. We've got whiteboards.
Yeah. Socially, you can keep up with All the Right Movies on Twitter or X, where we are at ATRightMovies. We post threads on there that tell the stories behind classic films, where everything we post has been said by somebody involved in the production or comes from 3 separate sources, which is the same as our podcast, so you should check that out. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/alltherightmovies. We also post those threads on Blue Sky, and we're at alltherightmovies.com. On TikTok, we're at alltherightmovies. On Instagram and Threads, we are at all_rightmovies. We have a movie group on Facebook, which is full of lots of great people and great film chat.
Yep.
So go join that. You may need to borrow Louise's book to make sense of some of it,
Yes.
but it's worth it.
It is worth it, yeah.
And our website, full of great features, is alltherightmovies.com.
We are everywhere.
Yeah.
try and avoid where it's going to be. That's more difficult than getting involved, surely.
Turning up in 12 spaceships around the world.
Yeah, we are.
We're all off now to have coffee with some aliens and see if Matt can teach Westy and me Ian's language of love, which he knows so well.
I'll teach you my language of love if you want.
Surely you don't want to miss The Last Crusade.
Definitely not. It's going to be hilarious.
So come back for that. And for now, thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you for listening, guys. Massively appreciated. Take care out there.